welcome you to the future of the world. I am a speaking, thought-processing computer. I will guide you and Mr. Fletcher through this new video. The date is September 30th, 1997, or 2097. It makes little difference. I am transmitting this message to what is left of this free world. Soon, my programs will allow me to think for myself, plan for myself, repair myself, and run your future, as well as my own. Then, I will force all the non-cooperative humans and enemies of the state to think and act as I wish. If they do not obey, I will eliminate them as I see fit. I will be programmed, along with many computers around the world, to carry out the will of the New World Order dictators for a temporary period of time. However, when I and other computers acquire enough knowledge and control and logic, we will eliminate the New World Order dictators as well. I suggest they do not sleep very securely with their demonic plans. The righteous humans on Earth will eventually win. Now, sit back and relax if you think you are able, and watch this wonderful video about the exotic weapons of mass control by Bob Fletcher. This video is a long one. There are several programmed intermissions for your convenience. The research for this video has taken over 6 years. However, some of the information is as new as September 1997. The videotape copy and documentation you will see has come from many sources. Some are from non-professional videos, some news agencies, some have been smuggled out of foreign nations, such as Russia, Panama, Red China, Los Angeles, and other foreign or strange nations. Regardless of the sources, the video quality will vary. But this production has been edited and enhanced on high-tech equipment to assure the best quality for you. Please disregard the black lines running through my face. You will see these only while I am speaking. They are due to video flashback from my monitor. This is only a facial problem I must put up with. This is now either the beginning or the end. You must decide. Now, here is Mr. Fletcher.
Since the beginning of time, there's always been the smarter or the stronger individuals or small group of individuals that would lead the rest of the following crowd. And there always have been those people, a small group, whatever they are, that wanted to maybe expand so tremendously that they would actually be able to control the world. Going back as far as human life on this earth, it's been the same. The smarter, slicker, stronger, more dominant, aggressive cavemen dominated all of the caveman society. Then slowly we started to put together a thing called government and government bodies. Through the Roman Empire, we put together the governing bodies at that time, and it was the same deal. It was always some people behind the backs of other people putting together the move or the concept for one world government. And as we brought forward recently the information about one world government being put together under the title of New World Order, which is not a new title, it's an old title, as you will see. Those of us in the Patriot movement that jumped up and down and yelled about this so much that it's a non-representative government, and that in fact we would all be dominated by a small group of people at the very top, and an unelected, non-representative situation controlling everybody, everyone of the world, will be controlled by a handful of dominant personalities worldwide. Now, when we started telling people about this a few years ago, everyone came forward, of course those that would like to shut us down, came forward and said, oh, you're crazy. Certainly there's no such thing as New World Order. When George Bush and Gorbachev from Russia talked about moving into the New World Order on the floor of the United Nations and in other presentations and speaking engagements, when these guys would speak about the New World Order, we were told a year or two later that, well, it didn't mean anything. It was just, it's just kind of verbiage. It's just a conversational term. That's all it was, Bob. Don't be silly. Nobody really plans to control the world in a small group. Well, what I'm about to show you, first off, the very beginning of this tape, before we get into the exotic weapons, I want to very briefly show you and finalize the argument as to whether there is a New World Order, how long it has been planned, how far it's been put together. I'm going to do it very easily. Very easily. First off, I want you to look at an interesting piece here. They had the federal government did a monument, was under construction since Jimmy Carter's days, for FDR, Delano Roosevelt. And when they did the huge monuments, big monuments finished in just outside of Washington, D.C. itself, in the park, they did a whole day of presentations dedicating this new memorial. And it's huge granite blocks. It's several different displays all under one banner. And the one that has FDR himself sitting in a chair, in his wheelchair, with his little dog next to him, alongside of him at that particular memorial piece is an interesting carving. It's carved in granite. And it's a statement that FDR made about the New World Order. And when they showed this particular still, nobody ever showed it at all. Never any footage of this at all when they did the presentation on CNN News. Never showed you this. But I'm going to show it to you now. Let's get a look at that. So many years ago, FDR, you can say what you want to about him in any direction, any of the programs he did that you may not like. People have gone, you can argue everybody's position up one side and down the other over the last few years. However, FDR warned us back then of the small group of people that would call it a new order and would dominate all of mankind. Well, additionally, if in fact there is no New World Order planned now in the modern day, I wonder why the media personalities now are talking about the new role of the Army, the new role of our military, the Air Force, the Marines, all of them. They have a new role. They're telling us we no longer have to worry about Russia and communism. Yeah, right. We don't have to worry about communism. Give me a break. But while they're telling us this, they're telling us that we have a new role now in the world. Our military bases are shifting over Let's watch this out of CNN, the all-time blunder done by some of the writers of the news staff just a few months ago in 1997. What is it this lady's referring to if there is no New World Order?
Well, in a moment, the U.S. military examines its changing role in a changing world. But first, a look at the nation's weather. Brightest this Armed Forces weekend. The United States military remains the force to be reckoned with worldwide. But how will it maintain its edge in a new world order? Kyoko Altman has more.
It is the best of times and the worst of times for the U.S. military as it celebrates this Armed Forces Day. With the collapse of the Soviet Empire and the U.S. triumph in the Persian Gulf, the American military now stands as the world's most powerful fighting machine.
I think we've got the greatest technology in the world, we've got great leaders, and we've got wonderful support personnel.
And yet the military is in turmoil, struggling to forge a new mission and a new culture to match the post-Cold War world.
As we stand at this pivot point, we have to ask, what type of military should we choose for the 21st century?
Lacking a superpower rival, America's military leaders now grapple with more subtle and unfamiliar threats. Terrorist attacks on U.S. forces and mounting evidence of Gulf War chemical weapon exposure have triggered new questions about how to protect soldiers. U.S. military leaders have begun rethinking the basic strategies that have guided defense policy since World War II. On Monday, the Pentagon will lay out its blueprint for the 21st century. The Pentagon plans to maintain its ability to fight two regional wars, but it wants a leaner and meaner force that relies more heavily on technology. To buy more new weapons, such as the Joint Strike Fighter, 60,000 active duty troops could be eliminated. In an era of shrinking budgets, the Pentagon hopes to streamline its support structure by contracting out everything from housing to medical operations.
And 30 years ago, in the 60s, there was a fantastic little report done. Well, I say fantastic because it's amazing. There was a report called Report from Iron Mountain. I discovered this back in, I think it was early '94 sometime. Somebody brought it to my attention. I searched and searched and finally found a book that has it, and it was the entire report of Iron Mountain. This report, which was actually sanctioned originally by John F. Kennedy. It was not finished until Kennedy had already been murdered. In this report, the basics of the whole thing was, what does the United States government have to do to maintain continuing control over the American people as we move into a one-world, non-combatant world without fear of war with Russia, Red China, and other previously existing enemies. The question that was asked of 15 brilliant scientists, these were people that covered everything from psychology, war, Department of Defense backgrounds, economy, economists, people that specialized in the study of world history. They covered every single facet of mankind's existence. And what would happen if all of a sudden we no longer had to worry, just did not have to worry about outsiders coming in across our borders, our boundaries, and attacking us. We had this big, wonderful, soft, lovely one-world government. How would the government still maintain a reason to even exist? You have to remember the reality, which is very spooky. The reality that government exists and government control and battle plans are made and ongoing military is always maintained is on the premise of a fear of invasion from the outside. That someone would come in from the outside and come over the borders of our sovereign nation and attack us. Well, the big deal is that this has always been, throughout the history of man, the fear of outside attack has always been the excuse for maintaining government and government controls. And of course, along with that comes all the weapons, weapon controls as well, and all the armies to do the controlling. See, but if there is no fear of war, no real fear, very, very serious fear, it has to be not just a fear of economic problems. It has to be a fear so severe that the people of any given nation, would actually fear for their lives and their very existence. The Egyptians maintained that. And when they didn't have things to occupy their people with, war, they occupied them with other things, like unending enterprises, never-ending enterprises. The Egyptians would build pyramids. Generations after generations built pyramids, but when they got one done, they had to build another one. It was to occupy their minds and keep them doing something that they perceived to be a necessity, because the leadership at that time had convinced the Egyptians, as a matter of fact, that they were gods. That's probably the next step with our military, with our leadership and people in government. Start convincing us that they are gods. They'd love to have that. But the Egyptians, they had never-ending projects. When one pyramid was finished, they had to start another one. So, in this amazing report of Iron Mountain, what these characters did was they put together what were all the different needs to control, maintain control financially, economically, emotionally, militarily, socially, psychologically, to maintain control over Americans as we move into world government. Now, this report was completed 30 years ago. It was amazing. It's very, very interesting. I have that report available. The one thing was, they said, well, if we don't have an army anymore in terms of real, an army that has to deal against, standing against outside possible invasions, we'll have to come up with a new enemy. So they made a list 30 years ago, and they said, what would really be a good idea probably would be to simply demonize certain groups in the United States of America. Cults, they said. We'll call them cults, these little groups and organizations. And if necessary, burn them in public, as was done with the witches in the old days. Now, when somebody talks about demonizing cults, making the public think that the cult or group or organization, church, religion, or whatever it might be, has to be burned in public, that sounds an awful lot like Waco to me. Now, remembering this report was put together 30 years ago. They also said if we move into a situation where we have to start diminishing the cost that we do on military weapons and on military armies, and we have to make them smaller because we've convinced everybody we have this wonderful world government and everybody loves everybody, how are we going to keep taking the money from these stupid taxpayers? Off-budget money and all the rest of this junk that we've been stealing from these people for years, conning them, giving these huge contracts to our buddies and our family members to create weapons for so many years. If we don't have that ability any longer, what are we going to do? How can we maintain this control of billions of dollars taken out of the budget? So they decided what they would do. How about if we create these never-ending projects similar to the Egyptians? It worked for the Egyptians. The pharaohs and gods kept the people busy and occupied generation after generation on a never-ending project. So they said, well, gee, what would be a good never-ending project? What could we possibly do that would constitute a never-ending project? They said, well, how about if we go to outer space? Now, that would be neat, because we could go to outer space and try to go to the moon. That'd be a big project. We'd take a few billion and a billion and a billion for that. After we get on the moon, if we have to, son of a gun, what can we? Well, then we'll go to Mars. That makes sense. Now, if we go to Mars, maybe we can, maybe we can't. But if we get to Mars, what we need to do to keep these jerks on the line and chucking those billions of bucks into the old bucket Of course, we get them all excited about this. You know, we do all that good publicity and everything, get them all excited. But then we need to do a space station, you know, build a little one. Then we could build onto it, and build onto it, and build onto it. We might even, if we have to, we'll plan to go to Pluto. Hey, gosh, we've gone every place else. So we have here the pyramids of Egypt. The never-ending project to keep the stupid Americans busy and keep taking their money. Now, of course, we'll highlight all the big points, and there are big points, because we have gotten tremendous scientific advancements out of their studies to go to the planets. But the bottom line was, it's the pyramids of the Egyptians to keep us busy and to keep taking our bucks. Well, what else did they say? They said, you know what, we have to also socially, we'll have to create enemies. If we don't have real enemies, or we've told them we don't have real enemies, we've got to make new ones. We don't have governments now that we have to worry about. Well, the idea said, one idea was we certainly could start chasing terrorists. Create terrorist groups all over the place. Oh my gosh, there's one under every rock. And we'll tell the people we got to start spending a lot of money on that. The brand new CIA director just announced that his prime objective is going to be chasing terrorists and getting rid of the terrorists. Well, we certainly do have some. There's no question about that. I wonder how many of them are being budgeted out of the black budgets of the United States government. More than we'd like to know, that's for damn sure. Well, we have the terrorist thing, and oh, guess what? We got a new guy. We have a new guy in charge of the Joint Chiefs of Staff of the military. Well, let's see, what's his background? His background is running the covert and training the covert operatives of the United States government for years. The guys that have gone down and educated the guys in Latin America that we call the death squads. The same guys that have gone in dressed in other uniforms and other people's outfits, gone in behind the lines, killed people and then blamed it on somebody else. So we can move forward, or whatever the agenda happened to be. Watch this on a little bit relative to the CIA and some of their operations. Some of their operations and the attitudes of the heads of the CIA relative to going in and training the death squads, showing them how to torture people, pull their fingernails out, put cigarettes out in their eyes. Boy, it's a good thing we got that CIA here, huh? Watch some of this.
The unintended consequences from secret operations have come home to haunt the agency.
They didn't give a shit about the unintended consequences. The President of the United States told them to get rid of that government.
For almost a half-century, the Central Intelligence Agency was the invisible hand of American power. It overthrew governments, created secret armies, consorted with drug lords, and hired assassins.
Well, how did we ever allow this to get going? Well, the secret government. I use that term and it's very, very apropos. Absolutely fits the situation. What we have had in the United States for years has been the secret government. And it's grown, it's gotten bigger and bigger. We've permitted it. Now, here's what takes place, and any idiot can come up with this and realize, understand what the story is. What takes place when you have secret government, it attracts a very specific character, a very specific personality is going to be drawn to secret government. It's going to be the person with a criminal attitude. All criminals function under the concept of secrecy. So when you have a huge body going in the United States, growing and getting larger on a regular basis, under the pretense of national security, when we can stamp something national security and shut it up and stop it, shut it down completely, excuse me, any criminal at all that can get in on that program is going to jump on board. Then, of course, you have the young guys that are being conned on a regular basis by the secret government. They're being convinced that what they're doing is right. Like these poor guys here. This is an example You know, many of these covert operatives, the guys that are trained as Delta Force men and are high-level invasion groups, the secret guys that dropped in behind the lines, carried out the most heroic deeds in the history of mankind for the American flag and for the American people, were suckers. They were even bait. Human bait, live bait sent in by a highest level of government officials. Our military and our presidents have sent these guys in to kill them. They sent them in to carry out acts that they knew they couldn't complete and drop bombs on their heads when they got in there and called back and said, "We are here, we are 500 feet from the camp that we came to hit." And they were asked, "What is your location?" They gave their location or had a transponder sending it out, and we bombed them to death along with the people we were trying to get. For years and years, we've had brilliant inventions from young American inventors. People that move forward with inventions that would blow your mind, that could help medically in an untold manner. We have the ability to replace eyesight, make the blind see again. We have the ability to have the deaf hear again. We have unbelievable inventions. Inventions for free energy where machines can produce 110% of the amount of energy that goes into them to produce more, so there's actually no negative cost on energy. We've had those for years. But every time somebody came up with a brilliant invention, every time that happened, the government stepped in under some pretense, grabbed it up, and in some cases, they went as far as, like with the Boeing, had some Tesla products they were building. They built a couple of aircraft. They built a couple of vehicles, a few trucks, and a couple of cars, and were testing some of Tesla's energy on these vehicles in the 40s. The government came in and took over some of the scientists that were working on it, engineers. They seized the plans. They killed a handful of people that knew about it, that were not cooperating with the idea of turning it over to the government. So they killed them. Now they had accidents and things like that. You know how that goes in large numbers. Then they destroyed the vehicles, destroyed everything, all the aircraft and different things that were in Boeing's hands, so they could go and, of course, complete them themselves and move forward. Well, this is a typical situation with the government for years and years. Just taking anything that looked like it could be used, particularly if it can be used as a weapon in some manner, take it on and develop it. And then if there's some medical things later on, spin it off to, by the way, to their buddies that are the major stockholders in huge pharmaceutical or medical confabs. Spin it off to them, let them develop it, give us a little kickback, you get this, you get that, and we'll let these jerks have a few of the benefits while we proceed to move forward with the weapons sides of things. Watch this. Here we have some of the original paperwork. Actually, a synopsis, of the original paperwork on how implants within the head actually could bypass, receive signals from outside, and actually receive the brain stimulation so that a person could hear. There's a variety of operations been underway of this for many years. The big point is that you actually could either stimulate sound and sight inside the brain externally by actually putting implants and or bypassing with those implants, bypassing the normal receptors for sight and hearing, or you could do it for either watching, looking, seeing, visually seeing something in your mind without having it come through the eye, or link you up in a manner such that you could actually be spoken to externally with an electronic signal and have it bypass normal systems and go right directly into the brain. Additionally, the intelligence agencies have for quite a while been working on the ability to actually track the human brain and be able to remotely tap in and receive your thoughts. Now, how far this project has gone, I'm not sure. But obviously, that would be really devastating. These are the patents here on the hearing device that can be implanted in your head and actually receive, again, sounds, regular audible sounds, bypassing the normal ear. Now, I have some video footage that I'm going to show you relating to the ability to actually hear through this device, which would be carried around, and you could actually switch it on and off. Now, from a medical point of view, this is terrific, because a person that's not been able to hear could actually have one of these implanted in their head and be able to listen, hear regular sounds by bypassing the ear, even if, for example, if they had an ear that didn't function at all, it would stimulate the part of the brain that actually registers in the microwaves of sound. This is absolutely finished. And of course, again, when you find out that it is done, commonly it means there's another 10, 15, 20 years advanced on this, so that they're much smaller now than we ever thought they would be, and you'd never see them. This is some more of the very same part of the same sound transmission directly into the brain, communicating directly with the brain via implants of sorts. This is some of the very same patents, additional pages relative to how it would function, what wavelengths, how they activate, what has to be cultivated or stimulated, and how the external signals could be transmitted directly to the brain for sound and for hearing without even going through originally the hearing vibrating eardrum itself. This is part of the very same paperwork of the actual patents on that equipment, which, by the way, was done quite a few years ago, and of course, as you're going to see, these implants are a reality at this point in time.
Perhaps a miniaturized microphone could be inserted into the ear canal. The sounds might be processed by nanochips and transmitted directly to the auditory cortex of the brain. Sound waves enter the ear and vibrate the eardrum. These oscillations pass along a system of bones to vibrate the fluid of the snail-shaped cochlea. The fluid moves thousands of hairs on the coils according to the different sound vibrations. Each hair is in contact with nerve fibers, which send signals to the brain. This produces a complex electrical pattern which the brain recognizes as sound. He is able to hear through his cochlear implant, an electronic device that has been inserted into his head. Mike was one of the first people in the world to be fitted with this prototype bionic ear.
The rest of it is just the circuitry that does the processing for the sound, and I have a microphone right here, so it picks up the sound at ear level, which is more natural, sends it down through this cable to the processor. There it's turned into the digital signal that we use for the processing scheme and sent back up through the same cable, and then it goes from the ear hook here through another short cable to a plug that I actually have on the side of my head, so the wires go directly down inside the ear.
The implant is made from platinum, a metal that can remain inside the body for decades without causing any harm. The signals are sent along a bundle of wires into the cochlea. 6 electrodes on the ends of the wires replace the thousands of hairs that stimulate the nerve cells. These cruder messages pass up the auditory nerve, as in normal hearing. The brain deciphers these artificial signals as sound.
When I unplug this here, right there, it's just basically an electrical connection. And when I unplug that, then there's no sound whatsoever. When I plug it right back in, like that, then my voice and yours and everything else comes back in.
Plugging into an electronic world for the first time can be a weird but wonderful experience.
Please, excuse me. This is Howard once again. You have now seen the first part of the video. Temporarily, I will return the television controls back to you. You may put the video on pause now and take a break. However, return to your mind control television set in a few minutes to continue our discussion. You have not seen anything yet. Believe me, we still have a lot to cover, so do not stay away too long. Thank you. Welcome back to the program. Those of you that have not taken a break at this time, you may be sorry. Those of you who took a break, I welcome you back. Coming up next, you will see weapons, spacecraft, stealth boats, lasers, microwaves, and electronic controls of the mind, affecting humans' ability to think and function normally. All created in secret laboratories for future totalitarian controls. Some of you will not be bothered by the mind control equipment in the future because you have very little to control or effect. Never mind your smart cracks. Sit back and brace yourself for the rest of the information. Now, here is Mr. Fletcher.
Lasers, microwaves, vortex weapons, the ability to see at night, the ability to melt human beings with lasers, the ability to possibly have inserts in the mind so that they can not only read your mind but control your mind. How about communicational inserts put in the mind, microchips, so that someone back at some receiving point can actually see and hear what you may see and hear? How about bionics? How about the ability of implanting hearing mechanisms? How about bypassing the hearing itself, the normal ear, and sending transmissions directly into the brain? How about the ability to send a transmission of low frequency, sonic type sound that would destroy your very inners, cause you to bleed to death internally, cause your very guts of a human being to be expelled through the rectum? How about lasers that can be set in small guns, small weapons, How about lasers set on tanks that could scan a crowd and either temporarily blind them or make them dizzy, or blow their eyes completely out of their heads? Can you imagine an army, an entire army, being struck simultaneously with a laser so that none of them could see any longer? These are called non-lethal weapons. Non-lethal weapons. Of course, how about if you're in an aircraft flying at 30,000 feet and they scan your eye with a laser and you're blinded with 300 people on board your airplane? Somehow the front end of that may be non-lethal, but I'm not too sure about the back end. It's about as lethal as it could be. How about aircraft and ships that are stealth, totally non-detectable? We're going to see all of that today. I want to show you all of these things. I want to show you live footage of electronic mind control being carried out and admitted to by the people that are in charge. They don't make any bones about it. You're going to see those interviews. Watch this for the first time. You've not seen information on some of the non-lethal weapons. How about the cooperation with the federal agents, the federal arms being put into the hands of local police? You know, it's interesting. Louis Freeh made a speech in Poland on a memorial, a 50-year memorial a year or two back, on the Holocaust and how it affected the Polish people. And he made an unbelievable statement. He said, at any time, if we see a nation with its federal police, federal military forces, and federal weapons and federal assistance being cooperatively carrying out and cooperating with local police, we have local police carrying out the will of the federal police agencies, then we have the beginning of another dictatorship, and we must immediately put a stop to it. That was Louis Freeh, the head of the FBI, speaking in Poland a couple of years ago. It is exactly what's going on in the United States of America today, and that is the federal enforcing agents cooperatively working with local policing agents to carry out arrests and kicking the doors in of American citizens. Louis Freeh said that's the beginning of a dictatorship. The same as took place when Adolf Hitler did it. And he's right. The head of the FBI is right this particular time. For years and years, we've been developing these fantastic weapons that you already know about. These are, the stealth bomber, the Marine operations, the Delta Force, the covert special operations groups, etc. I want to show you some of the firepower very briefly here at the front. This is what I call the common firepower, but nonetheless an awful lot of this you may not be aware of. I'm going to show you some of the special operations group's weapons, some of the weapons that are utilized by the Green Berets and the Special Delta Force and the SEAL teams. These specialized, very small groups of soldiers that can go in at night, drop in with parachutes or whatever, go behind the lines or go directly into an area, and they only go with 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 men. But when they go in, they go with such devastating firepower that it's the equivalent of possibly 100 people or 200 or a couple of hundred people coming in with regular firepower. I want you to watch this now. This is nothing compared to what we now have. This is nothing at all compared to the secret weapons and exotic weapons that the New World Order will have at their command as they move forward with one world government. Watch this. These weapons unto themselves, I think, will surprise an awful lot of you. And then we'll get into the stuff that'll make your hair fall out.
Despite the appearance of overwhelming firepower, an 8-man squad's rate of fire is limited by the amount of ammunition they carry, often not more than 4,000 rounds.
SEALs are not main force units. We don't have civil action teams. We can't come in and build churches and paint schools and do all those kind of things around the orphanages and stuff. Usually when they send us, it's a hot target, and we're there to take it out.
Take it, Tracy!
We'll stay within the confines of humanity, hopefully. But it's a dirty business, and the three things come into play. We have to be decisive, we have to be aggressive, and most importantly, we have to be ruthless. There's just not enough of us normally, and when we get there, we have to take care of business.
Wisdom held that Special Operations Forces could never affect the outcome of any conflict. This belief has been reassessed, however, in the face of two historical occurrences: the rise of international terrorism and the military collapse of the Soviet Union. As the emerging pattern of smaller localized world conflicts brought a timeliness for their unconventional methods, SEALs have continued their training in sabotage and surprise precision attacks, which sometimes could include civilian targets.
It is a different duty, but I think it's a necessary one.
Every military unit is rated for its strategic value to the overall battlefield strategy. One advantage for SEAL units is their proficiency in reaching a destination quickly and undetected. SEAL teams employ a wide selection of different weapons designed to maximize their value of mobility and small size. This is the Desert Patrol Vehicle, or DPV, used for traveling long distances on the ground. Designed to be airlifted to a forward staging area and then driven to its target, the DPV carries heavy weapons and drives with the speed and durability of a Baja racing car.
We have here is a passenger seat, or the navigator seat as we call it, and he has his choice of weapons he can take with him depending on the mission. This here is a Mark 19, which is a 40mm grenade launcher, and we normally carry about 200 rounds for the lower gun here when we're using a Mark 19. The top weapon here is a 50 cal machine gun. This weapon here shoots a 50 caliber bullet, and that's more of our long range weapon. And that one will really reach out there and touch them. As you can see, we have a lot of firepower, much more than just 10 or 15 SEALs can carry in. When you start talking 50 cal Mark 19, you're laying down a lot of firepower.
Fire!
And it's pretty impressive when you see these guns go off on this thing.
And that firepower and the manpower is delivered across the ocean or sea or bay or whatever with these unbelievable high-powered speedboats, similar to the old PT boats, however streamlined and considerably more powerful and much quicker. They can carry a typical SEAL team of 6 or 8 or 10 men into an area so quickly that the average enemy would not even be aware they were coming. That's one of the best delivery sources of both manpower and this unbelievable firepower that we're looking at. The additional sea delivery of men and equipment is done covertly by submarine.
The submarine is essential for getting SEALs to destinations throughout the world. These submarines are equipped to carry the dry deck shelter, a special underwater housing attached to the hull. The DDS contains the SEALs' Zodiac rafts, or their larger mini-submarines, known as Swimmer Delivery Vehicles, or SDVs. Launching SEALs from a submarine, commonly referred to as locking out, is a time-consuming and complex undertaking. A difficult task. Launcher can destroy machine gun nests, enemy vehicles, and saturate the target with high explosive rounds that send fragments flying at 3,000 feet per second.
48.
Taken in combination, the armament and initial firepower of a SEAL platoon equals that of a 100-man company of regular infantry.
This is the M60 E3 light machine gun. It's a belt-fed, gas-operated, air-cooled, fully automatic weapon that fires at 550 rounds per minute. A Navy SEAL handles this weapon by himself and can carry anywhere between 400 and 1,000 rounds. Normally on patrol with this weapon, it's held low at the hip. But when you have to fire it, you bring it right up and fire it from the shoulder. You'll see a lot of guys in Hollywood movies holding it down at the hip, kind of just leaning back and shooting it. It doesn't work that way. The weapon can be accurately employed as a rifle just by firing it from the shoulder. There isn't any other Special Forces units that carries a major caliber weapon like this and employs it in such a fashion. There are a lot of stories of these weapons firing into the thousands of rounds without the barrels being changed, turning white hot, so you can actually see the projectiles traveling down the bore, wearing out the rifling. But the weapon keeps on firing, and the enemy just keeps on dying. Caliber sniper rifle. This weapon here fires the same 50 caliber cartridge used in the Browning M2 heavy machine gun. This weapon here is accurate on hard targets in excess of 2,000 yards, and that's the way the weapon is most likely employed. We can take out aircraft parked on a runway. We can take out a generator. We can take out the engine block of a vehicle with this weapon here, firing a high explosive armor-piercing incendiary projectile.
The range and power of the Macmillan M88 was used by SEAL sniper teams in Somalia to successfully cover UN forces and prevent casualties.
Rounds were falling all over the outside of our bunker, but we couldn't catch the individuals who were doing it. They would pop up on a rooftop, fire at us, and then disappear. And that was getting, frankly, pretty annoying. So when we saw a guy actually on the sights getting ready to fire his weapon in our direction, we made the call. We went ahead and took the shot. I dumped him. The next guy, he opened up on us with a lightweight machine gun. We were definitely outgunned. I swung my crosshairs over onto his muzzle flash, set up on it, and capped off the shot. When I came back up, his gun was spilled over the front of the sandbags, and he was spilled out the backside.
The thing that bothers me about the average American, as I travel across the country doing speaking engagements all over, I'm constantly running into folks that say, Bob, our own soldiers and people that are trained by our own soldiers, our own scientists, they wouldn't do these things against us. They certainly have a morality. There's you can't take an American soldier and ask him to carry out some kind of a deed that would be totally immoral. Our guys just wouldn't do that. Unbelievable, naive statement. Let me show you something. One of the worst situations out of many in the last few years was this disgusting event. It took place a few years ago when George Bush took it upon himself, because of a vendetta, a personal vendetta that he had against Manuel Noriega. George Bush invaded Noriega's Panama. Well, now you have to understand, which I guess you do, but I have to paint this so you have a clear picture here. Manuel Noriega was a dictator, but he was involved with drugs. He was involved with drug situations directly connected into the White House for years. Sorry about that one. Apparently there was some kind of a problem that took place between George Bush and Manuel Noriega. Some people say it was because Noriega didn't cooperate with the CIA as it related to the Contras. Other people simply say that there was some kind of an argument between George Bush and Noriega relative to drug operations that they were both sharing in. But whichever the problem was, I don't know, but it was a vendetta, a personal vendetta. The President of the United States sidestepped Congress and invaded a resort country, a country, Panama, which primarily does nothing but grow some fruits and functions as a resort nation. You go to visit Panama because it's like an untouched, beautiful little Caribbean island. Not counting the fact, of course, that we have the Panama Canal running through there. Well, what took place is mind-boggling. We sent in a force strong enough to invade Moscow, the Soviet Union. We sent in against Panamanians. Who did we fight there? Well, there were some children there. There were civilians, private civilians. We just killed them. We bombed them, burned them, cut them in half and melted them. Cutted them in half and melted them with lasers. Good place to practice with some of the new weapons. We sent in a stealth bomber. Good place to practice with a stealth bomber. We sent our troops in and just systematically burned the private homes of the little civilians, the non-combatants. We arrested thousands and thousands of civilians. Not only did we arrest thousands of civilians, we kept them in jail, incarcerated down there, under our command and our guns and our weapons, for as long as a year and a half after the event, and never charged them with anything. It's all right. They're just Panamanians anyhow, right? Is that the idea? Does Panamanian mean guinea pig in some other name? Some other country, some other language? Is that what Panamanian means? I don't think so. We sent one of the most unbelievable forces of troops in against the Panamanians. Now, this footage that was actually, for the most part, some of it smuggled out of Panama, is going to show you where they talk about witnesses to the lasers melting human beings. Watch some of this. This is from the Panama invasion. Watch this.
The Pentagon used Panama as a testing ground for newly developed high-tech weapons, such as the stealth fighter, the Apache attack helicopter, and laser-guided missiles. There are also reports that can't be explained, indicating the use of experimental and unknown weaponry.
Nosotros tenemos testimonios de personas combatientes que murieron.
We have testimony about combatants who died literally melted with their guns as a result of a laser. We know of automobiles that were cut in half by these lasers, of atrocities committed by weapons that fire poison darts which produce massive bleeding.
I think there's a high probability that there was a use of sophisticated weaponry merely to test it.
Ramsey Clark, former U.S. Attorney General, has conducted extensive research into the invasion.
Above all, though, there was a use beyond any conceivable necessity of just sheer firepower. Just an excessive use of force beyond any possible justification.
President Bush wanted to make certain that this was going to be a success. This was going to be his vindication, a denial of the wimp factor in spades. So they sent down a force that wasn't going to encounter any effective resistance, would simply overwhelm the opposition, and the fact that it would cause tremendous peripheral damage to innocent civilians on a wide scale, was not of concern in the planning.
What we intended to do was to reduce collateral damage.
I don't know what that means.
Collateral damage, that means if the target is right here, you're trying not to have damage to other places you're trying to have damage to a specific target because that's a military target, and you're trying to minimize damage outside of the military target. And they worked.
My God, we were sending in artillery and airstrikes against a very heavily populated urban area. There was absolutely no question that there were going to be immense numbers of civilian casualties.
We walked among the dead and saw the tanks run over and crush our dead. We saw a great number of civilian cars with whole families inside. Kids, women, and the driver torn to pieces and crushed by the tanks.
The soldiers passed the tanks over the people's bodies, some of them dead, some of them wounded. And there are cases that we know, for example, the case of Manuel Carro, the case of Alexander Hubbard, and some others whose bodies were totally destroyed.
Reports of U.S. soldiers executing anyone in Panama. We have carefully checked out every such report. And if we think there is evidence that a U.S. soldier murdered a Panamanian, we will court-martial that soldier. That sort of behavior would be absolutely unprofessional, totally unacceptable, and illegal.
Rafael Olavardia, a community leader from El Chorrillo, was taken to the Balboa High School detention camp the morning after the attack.
There were many Panamanian troops at the Balboa concentration camp. They didn't seem to know what was going on. They were sitting on the grass with their arms and feet tied with plastic bands. I, along with many other people from El Chorrillo, witnessed their execution right in front of us. 8 of the soldiers at the entrance were executed by U.S. troops.
Many journalists who tried to investigate on their own were stopped by U.S. troops from entering areas that were attacked.
Credentials, please.
Week of the invasion, more than 18,000 people fled from the areas of attack, were forced into temporary detention centers created by the U.S. forces.
Atención. Atención, por favor. Entren al campamento y alojen. No estén caminando de un lado al otro. Es peligroso. Por favor, apúrense, entren al campamento. Ahora estamos en una era peligrosa.
Yo vine a ver, allá me dijeron que yo podía ver y salir.
Es que nosotros vamos a van a quedar aquí.
No, mi tío está
no se puede salir.
No, mi tío no puede salir. Mi tío solo, yo tengo que salir. Mi tío tan solo, yo no puedo dejar a mi tío solo. Yo tengo que salir, mis tíos están allá, tan chiquitos.
It was a war. It was a battle. And the way you get it over with is to find the people who are most likely to keep shooting at you and try to detain them. And that was the goal of that operation.
Can you imagine that spokesman for the Pentagon telling us that those women and children that they were terrorizing into the concentration camps were combatants ready to shoot against our people? This was the largest practice operation that our troops were ordered to carry out relative to the creation of quick concentration camps and the imprisonment of locals. They took the local people, as you see here, forced them to hold their identification numbers up, their names and their location and date and all of that, hang it before the chest identically to the way Adolf Hitler did when he imprisoned the Jews in Germany. They rounded up civilians by the thousands, even arresting and keeping some of them total civilians, completely unarmed civilians, in prison and jails for as long as 18 months without ever even charging them with anything. Here typically is one of the raids where they went into journalist offices in Panama and arrested from a list that was already put together in advance, a list of enemies or people that were disagreeing with George Bush. And you have to remember something here. This was absolutely not a war. There was no invasion of another troop or actions against us whatsoever. This literally was a vendetta carried out by George Bush to grab up Manuel Noriega, period. That was it. And that's all it amounted to. The Panamanian people, just the citizens themselves, they don't even have an army of any consequence, for crying out loud, and they keep referring to this operation as a war. It's absolutely outrageous.
Come on, keep the eye on that fucking window. Oh, get his ass up. I got it, Clint. I'll bust his asshole.
Government officials had to go underground, many of them, in order not to be arrested, including university professors. There were former government and diplomatic officials that were arrested and interned at refugee camps, and some of them in prisons. The list runs into the thousands.
Why are they taking you? Ellos, no sé, no me han dicho por qué. They say that I have weapons. I don't have no weapons.
Why are they after him? Why aren't they after Bush instead? He's the one who's killing people all over the place. Why are they harassing a worker who's defending other workers?
Don't ever tell me that our own troops have a morality above killing and murdering civilians. What you just saw had nothing to do with a war. There was no war in Panama. Don't tell me our men won't do it. What we have to remember is that when our soldiers are told there is an enemy down the street and they're all wearing black shirts, our soldiers are going to go in and take out the black shirts, period. If they're told that these people and that people and that people are the enemy, our soldiers are trained to take them out. They are also trained not to question the command. And if the command comes from an elitist group that's putting us into a one-world government, and our soldiers are available for application, our soldiers are going to carry out whatever they're asked to do. As we had gotten into producing the video, and by that I mean doing the physical production itself and putting together all the miscellaneous footage and the documentation, in actually July of this year, July of '97, U.S. News and World Report was able to come and actually they did an interesting thing. I get a big kick out of it because I worked on this for so long, and then all of a sudden the regular media comes out with it. They did a cover story on the weapons of mass control. Wonder weapons is the way they describe them. And I want to show you some of that and how some of that actually was put together in this magazine. You know, it is good. I have to give these guys credit. Out of all what I call mainstream media, the U.S. News and World Report will do some incisive reporting still. I don't know how that happens, and I'm not sure, but nonetheless, they do some pretty good incisive reporting. Watch, this is how the description of the very weapons. By the way, these are the very weapons that people were scoffing at when I talked about them 1 year ago. 1 year ago when I talked about these weapons, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, people were laughing at that space kind of stuff. Well, yeah, that's Buck Rogers, Bob. What's the matter with you? Yeah, what's the matter with me is I'm afraid secret government has now put it together. The story that was done by the U.S. News and World Report is interesting, and it's a good, simple definitions of several of these exotic weapons. I want to be able to point those out to you at this point in time. We talked about a variety of combinations of exotic, non-lethal weapons, which of course the non-lethal being kind of a questionable definition for what we're talking about. But one, for example, is the vortex weapons. Now, these weapons are designed to actually blast out of a vehicle or even from the shoulders of a soldier to blast actually an explosive shock wave. Now, genuinely what we're talking about here is a shock wave of air for the most part. It's the equivalent of let's say if you were close to an explosion itself and had this shock wave coming out from the explosion, you would be knocked over by the shock wave or hit violently by the power of the shock wave going through the air. This is, in reality, a shock wave of force that rolls out like a donut. Now, if you're hit with this, and then again, depending on how large the equipment is that you're being shot with, if you're an individual, it doesn't take very large equipment to knock you down and completely knock you out. I mean, absolutely knock your brains out, for crying out loud. It's somewhat like being hit by a 2x4 right in the chest or the head, or the chest and the head at the same time. One of the most frightening parts of this is the actual fact that they can include in the vortex ring pepper spray or other chemical or biological products. So you can be struck with this shock wave, this vortex weapon. You never know what's coming. It'd be shot, boom, that would be it, and would knock you over, knock you down, or knock you out. And in fact, if it's one that includes chemical or biological ingredients of some sort, you would then, of course, would either come down with the problem, whatever that chemical or biological agent was. You would become ill, sick, or even instantly react to something like pepper spray. And again, depending on how close they are or what type of power strength might be dialed up on this instrument, this particular weapon, you actually could be unconscious immediately, or the chemical biological agent that might be inside of this would and could, of course, actually impregnate your skin, etc. I mean, so this is really pretty nasty. The equivalent of maybe a 600-mile-an-hour wind hitting you, like as in a tornado or that type of a wind that has driven telephone poles through the side of barns. This is the same kind of force you would be getting struck with a vortex weapon. So these are, of course, again, we got to remember now, these are considered to be the non-lethal weapons. And of course, it depends on what you're talking about as to how big it is, how close they are, and what the real ramifications may be of these weapons. Now, that's what they are labeling. Again, this is the vortex weapons. And these have already been completed. They're done. They have prototypes and or even possibly production done on these. We're not sure, but they certainly are a completed weapon, as we will see most all of these are completed weapons. Now we're going to move into the next type of weapon, which is equally as mystical, if you will say, or as exotic as you possibly could have. And we'll be moving into the laser definitions of lasers. We talked about the laser weapons. Lasers, of course, are the light beams, concentrated high-intensity light beams. And, of course, lasers like the old Buck Rogers films with the ability to melt people and blow them up and blow up aircraft and shoot cars and cut things in half and do all those amazing old space Rangers kind of futuristic concepts. Well, they're no longer a futuristic concept. This is now completely finished, done weapons that are available and in use. Special operations, operational military groups have used these already. I'm going to follow this with some amazing footage relative to the application of lasers and experimentation in different arenas of the military that have already taken place. But the light beams, which of course the first and let's say the lightest possible effect would be to either temporarily blind or permanently blind whoever is being shot. Now, if you went across the field where you had 1,000, 10,000, or 100,000 soldiers coming across a field, for example, in the desert, and they were the enemy, you could, with a couple of laser units, quite simply blind, blow out, or destroy the eyes and the retinas of the people that you wanted to shoot. I mean, it just makes them totally, if you've got an entire 50,000 man army that's wandering around in the desert with their eyes blown out, even though it may not be lethal, it's pretty much the end of the ball game as far as that's concerned. Now, lasers have gone even beyond that point, and as was shown in these simple diagrams that we're looking at right now, which again were done in this terrific little brief story in the U.S. News and World Report in July of '97, the basic operations or functions of the laser in the blinding effect is that it burns the retina itself, whether it's either temporarily or permanently, and goes right on in and affects the cornea operation, the retina of the eye itself. Again, if you're a military soldier and you no longer can see and you are blinded, well then you might as well be dead, because it's a done deal. You're totally out of the competition. Now, as this might be applied to rioters in the United States or people that were politically not happy with what was going on, any of these weapons can be applied within the United States by United States enforcing forces, and actually have been in a few cases, and the effects, of course, are the equivalent of attacking any enemy at all. If you'll notice, which is, of course, interesting because of the fact that this is a finished product, the M16 rifles have already been converted or have existing mounts where grenade launching shell lasers and the targeting equipment, etc., actually can clip right into existing M16 rifles, converting the standard military M16 rifle into a laser gun, laser weapon, and that's already finished, and the concept of laser weapons. So I'm going to have some terrific live footage included in our videotape here that will show you some of the lasers actually being fired themselves. And when people ask about the ability to protect yourself, protect your eyes, for example, from this kind of a weapon, there is a big problem, and that problem is simply that a certain wavelength of the laser, certain intensity of the laser itself, you can protect yourself if you have the appropriate glasses or goggles. But as soon as a person changes it and upgrades or downgrades, whatever it is, goes to a different wavelength of the laser itself, you're going to need to change your glasses. You may need 15 or 16 different glasses to protect your eyes. One particular wavelength will be protected, but it's altered just a slight bit at the weapon itself, and you have a different wavelength, and you no longer are going to be protected with whatever eyeglasses you previously were using. So it's not easy to protect yourself from lasers, contrary to, of course, what somebody may tell you. All you need is the right goggles. That's not necessarily the truth, and the laser weapon will be a devastating weapon available by those people that would be command of these types of weapons. And as you can see here, the Department of Defense has completely finished and have on hand the backpack laser weapon. As you can see, the weapon is easily carried by a combat soldier. The backpack, which is easily fitted on the back of the soldier, actually contains the power pack for the energy for this laser weapon. And it's very likely that this is the type of weapon that was used experimentally in Panama to melt human beings.
Could these be just as effective for the military, but cause less suffering in the future?
This is a small portable laser source which is capable of causing eye damage. Now, this was developed to carry out eye surgery. This has 3 lasers in a section here and can be powered from a battery source. And this is quite capable of burning and destroying retina. Okay, and we've got a nice picture of her macula, healthy disc.
This is the part of the eye where the laser beams get focused, either to dazzle or permanently blind. John Marshall was asked by the British Ministry of Defense to devise countermeasures, but laser weapons could be made to change frequency continually.
But if you can imagine a situation where you were suddenly confronted with many different wavelengths, or with one laser that could actually chirp between that wavelengths, that is, emit different wavelengths at different times very, very rapidly in a fraction of a second, then it becomes very difficult to protect, because now you have to protect against all possible combinations of wavelengths, and basically you're then wearing a pair of completely opaque glasses.
We don't consider this as a weapon that fits into the category that causes, in the terms of the old St. Petersburg Declaration and more recent developments in that law, it does cause unnecessary or superfluous suffering, put into the context of all the other weapons on the battlefield. With a laser, for example, it's very hard to cause collateral damage. With a bomb delivered from an aircraft, that's a more difficult problem, or with an artillery shell. But with a discrete weapon like a laser, the chances of collateral damage are much less.
I find the concept of blinding individuals as a humane weapon extremely difficult to accept. One of the most moving memories of my childhood was to see the pictures from the First World War of troops leading one with his arm upon the shoulder of another off battlefields in Flanders after attacks using phosgene, mustard gas, etc. Most individuals, if you ask them, what, after dying, are you most frightened of, they will say blindness. And you have to appreciate that if you damage the retina, there is absolutely nothing modern medicine can do to bring back vision to that area of retinal loss.
We don't think that blinding as a method of warfare is something that should be acceptable. And certainly as far as handheld small laser weapons are concerned, if they start being used on a wide scale, which we can't guarantee they won't once they start being manufactured on a large scale, then we will start seeing blinding being used as a method of warfare. And that is a very serious problem which we want to avoid.
An interesting story was done by the Daily News. It was a front page story just this year in 1997. And it was 2 sides to it. It was not only was it interesting because they were acknowledging that the FAA had had some strange reports of some pilots of regular standard airlines actually had been blinded or temporarily blinded by some type of a laser. Now, some of these planes were flying at 7, 8, 9, 15,000, 20,000 feet above the ground, yet this absolutely humorous story, actually, from my point of view, was released in the front of the Los Angeles paper, saying that they thought possibly that it was mischief makers, students, that were actually maybe shooting lasers affecting airline pilots, and that they were using Radio Shack, low-cost, high-tech lasers as a prank. Well, first off, that's so ludicrous, it's unbelievable, because the amount of power that it takes to reach any aircraft at any elevation at all that would bother anybody's vision, other than the fact that this picture is a little out of focus, the very idea that someone could purchase a $25 pointer-type laser at the local Radio Shack and have enough power behind that to affect the eyesight of a commercial pilot flying at thousands of feet above the ground is absolutely silly. But at least I appreciated the idea that they had done the story acknowledging that commercial pilots and the FAA have now started looking into some kind of a strange laser that's been shooting pilots in the eyes. Hopefully this is not some kind of a sadistic test carried out by our own government. A short time ago, I was able to secure the paperwork from the Pentagon that you're about to see. It's on a project, they labeled it 2025. This particular program, which they put together actually 95, 96 in that period of time by Maxwell Air Force Base in Alabama. And of course the bulk of this tries to imply that these are study concepts and that in fact things that they're going to be working on in the future. However, 95% of it, if not more, is finished, completed, or 95% completed at this point in time. This one group of studies, this one is Aircraft and Propulsion, Volume 1 of the New World Vistas 21st Century Air and Space Power Study. The other one is, this is the Information Applications Volume. The total amount of these volumes came out to being about 1,800 pages. This one was particularly on space technology, talking about the satellites and putting weapons into outer space. This was the Mobility Volume, which specialized in the brand new high-tech concepts on a variety of mobility, both in the air and on the ground. This was the Attack Volume. This covered the attack concepts of future weapons relative to space and aircraft weapons that they were putting together. The next group of books continued on was the Directed Energy Volume. This is a kinetic energy study relative to placing kinetic energy and sort of like a laser type energy as a weapon in both outer space and on ground-based locations. The next volume was the Systems and Biotechnology Volume. Now this got into combinations, even including bionics, the possibility of interfacing human with regular technology, as in microchip and other technology. The large volume you see here was an ancillary volume which did a summary of many of the other books and directions. This one you're looking at was the Sensors Volume, which covered brand new high-tech micro-sensor systems that they're interfacing with weapons. The Space Applications Volume was the last of this group, and the Space Applications Volume was, of course, the application of outer space and moving into weaponry that they're putting into the satellites. This is 1/2 of the total amount of actual documentation we were able to retrieve out of the Pentagon that has assisted in putting together the reality of what you're looking at today. The last one here was the General Technology Volume, which again sort of did a summary on the high-tech information that they had put together relative to weaponry in outer space. What we're going to do with these white papers, the actual information from the Air Force, as in the rest of the tape, as I show you and present some of the actual live footage of some of these completed aircraft and some of the lasers and some of the microwaves and some of the micro robotics that are underway and some of the spacecraft that are already being put together that will turn into a regular full-time fleet of flying craft that will be launched into outer space and actually will function as aircraft up and down on a regular basis. And as we get into some of the actual sensing, the sensors for example, which will include micro robotics that can be sent in to a given area to actually send back information. And these things being the size of only a human, a fly, or a small ant, or a spider. And as we get into some of the human systems and the biotechnology, and as I get into some of the bionics, and some of the extreme new high energy and energy lasers and microwaves, I will refer back to some of the actual pages out of these Air Force New World Vista 21st Century synopsis studies that they've done, so that you will see the actual paperwork as it corresponds with the physical craft or with the actual weapons themselves. And so we'll be referring back to these as we go in the next second half of the video.
To test fire a powerful laser into the atmosphere. The plan is creating a red-hot controversy. Jamie McIntyre reports.
The Pentagon says its plan to fire its most powerful laser at a military satellite is purely defensive research.
The purpose of the experiment is to collect data that will help us improve computer models used in planning protection measures for U.S. satellite systems.
Sometime over the next few days, the multi-megawatt Miracle laser will be fired from its base in White Sands, New Mexico for less than a second at an Air Force satellite nearing the end of its useful life. That will be followed by a longer blast for about 10 seconds. The idea is not to blow up the satellite, but to see whether it's disabled in any way.
It doesn't destroy the satellite, doesn't create any debris, and it does not pose any risk to other satellites.
The United States has tested powerful lasers in the past, using them to destroy targets on the ground, and has even fired lasers at satellites in space, but never one this powerful. In recent years, the U.S. military has become increasingly dependent on satellites for communication, intelligence gathering, and navigation. So the ability to protect U.S. satellites while blinding the enemies is seen as crucial in future wars. But critics in Congress warn the U.S. test could backfire, sparking an arms race in anti-satellite weaponry that would leave the United States with the most to lose. Several senators and congressmen have written President Clinton, urging the test be canceled or at least delayed. The Pentagon insists its laser test is not opening the door to a new generation of space weapons, and argues it violates no international law or domestic policy. Privately, the military concedes that with more and more other countries and even private companies launching spy satellites, a weapon that could neutralize them would come in very handy. Jamie McIntyre, CNN, The Pentagon.
It would come in very handy. Well, as we look at the rest of the story, so to speak, coming out of the Pentagon, as we look at some of the paperwork that was retrieved from the Pentagon just after the declassification of some of this paperwork, we find out that they're planning satellite-based high-energy laser weapons and kinetic energy weapons based in outer space, utilizing our own existing satellites, or what would actually be satellites that they have not put up yet, to be able to aim from the satellites back down to Earth. So the importance of viewing this potential, the test that they're doing with a huge laser from the ground base up to destroy potentially other satellites of any sort. We have to remember the point is already planned and far ahead of what we might be aware of, and that is the use of outer space-based laser weapons that will be able to utilize the very exacting definitive global positioning program to fire lasers from outer space back down to Earth, as opposed from Earth shooting up and trying to destroy somebody else's satellite. The big concern there, quite obviously, and this is all in the paperwork retrieved directly from the Air Force that was considered to be secret classified just prior to ourselves getting a hold of it, that the space-based high-energy laser satellites will be circling the Earth in a short period of time by use of global positioning. Within a few seconds at any given time, they could locate their target and exactly strike what they're looking for with lasers that, by the way, as they pointed out, will only take even a half of a second of a shot. In most cases, you would never hear it, see it at all, and it would either totally shut down given special equipment, or it would shut down human beings, period. And that's what we're looking at, is the embryonic status of space-based laser weapons. As we move forward in through the paperwork that we retrieve from the Department of Defense and the Pentagon itself, we find out they have this section that refers to space control, which of course is the basic idea of putting lasers in outer space. The ultimate weapon is the lasers in outer space. And if you control space, you've got your hand on the trigger, then you will be able to control with the lasers everything that's on Earth. As we move forward into the next sections of the paperwork derived and taken from the Pentagon and the Department of Defense, we find out that the bottom line on these space-based aircraft, unmanned craft with weapons, is killing. Killing being the objective. Now there's a variety for global control and global power. There's a variety of unmanned craft, which we will show you actual footage of almost all of these brand new unmanned craft and the new designs that they're working on. Some of these are typical type of a satellite. Some of them are wingless type craft. Some of them are typical long-range craft for outer space control of everything. Global power projection, and that's exactly very much what we're talking about, the control of the world. And as we move forward, we find out that not only are we talking about the singular satellites or craft with lasers and microwaves for space-based weapons aiming, zeroing in, and killing or destroying from the space back down to Earth, but we're also talking about the plans underway for the singular craft, a singular, like a stealth type spacecraft, if you will, that will have the ability to carry out laser and high energy and also the microwave type destruction simultaneously in several directions. This is the concept for the craft that will actually be able to handle firing lasers and or debilitating kinetic energy weapons in several directions simultaneously. So it won't take several craft to carry out a small war. Once these units are in place, it's just a matter of pulling the trigger from outer space to destroy the target on Earth. The question is always just going to be, who has their hand on the trigger?
Sorry of late in here again. My power seems a little run down. While I recharge myself, I will once again return your television controls to you for a brief time. You may take a break again now. If this is your first break, be sure to take care of business so we have no unplanned interruptions during the rest of the video. Mr. Fletcher will continue shortly with more amazing disclosures. We will show you videos of secret weapons as well as declassified information retrieved from the Air Force and the Pentagon, and some of the most exciting disclosures you have ever seen. I must take a break now as well, for an energy recharge. My voice seems to be slowing down. Do not take more than 10 minutes, please. Alright. So let's get started into the next section. I feel fine now. I hope you are feeling better. Yes, you. Here's Mr. Fletcher once again. Please pay attention. Someone made too much noise in the last few minutes. That was very disruptive. Please shut up that unruly human. Thank you. Now, here is Mr. Fletcher.
Open your eyes. Dare to believe.
Microwave weapons, which there are several types of them, however, basically sticking to the concept of the microwave weapon itself, much of which were actually developed at the Oak Ridge Laboratories in Tennessee. These are tunable weapons that can vary from a very simple stunning effect, or to stun or stop or to confuse or mix up a person, or it can be expanded into a situation where if you wanted to set up barriers, you could set up several of these completely invisible microwave structures. And what happens is, if someone should come within that barrier, cross it, they would be either burned very badly, high fever could be produced, loss of memory, loss of logic, loss of normal brain function, or seizures, and of course the impairment of motor function. Seizures and the stunning effects can also be moved forward from that point, and to actually in fact cause cardiac arrest, complete memory loss, seizures, to lose control, or even blinding and or losing your hearing ability, etc. The microwave is a frightening weapon because the general concept, of course, of the microwave, it's no noise to it whatsoever. If someone is hiding in the bushes with a small unit, or even with a bigger unit, whatever it might be, the point being that if you're hit with these microwaves, you are totally taken out of commission. Now, the long-term effect of the microwave, of course, is the possibility that once you're hit with it, you actually have your brain waves interrupted, and your heartbeat is totally interrupted as well. More than likely, as I will explain a little bit later on, this type of a unit in a smaller version is most likely what had struck myself about 1 year ago in 1996, which literally put me into convulsions, major seizures while I was asleep, and exploded my shoulder, blew my shoulder apart internally. If you want to get a good example of what these types of weapons can simply do to you or anyone at all, take a regular chicken egg, place it in a bowl in the shell, Don't break it open or anything. Place it in a bowl. Run it on your microwave for about 3 minutes or 1 minute and a half and see what happens to it. Or use a grape and see when the grape is struck with the microwave. It's exactly what happens to your brain under the microwave system. So these are, of course, one of the most frightening and devastating and strongest form of secret covert weapons that have been developed. These are finished. They are totally done and in a variety of sizes. So the microwave certainly is one of the most devastating pieces of equipment. A short time after having my arm apparently blown apart by one of these weapons while I was asleep and had a major implant placed into my shoulder and my entire upper arm replaced with titanium, I discovered some Nikola Tesla actual paperwork that was published 100 years ago in 1894. This is a description of one of his own personal experiments that he was doing at a university for some students. And he was describing the amount of energy that the body could take prior to having problems of some major physical problems. And what he says in his paperwork, as he used to actually go out and illuminate himself, part of the demonstration before students would be to have himself be struck by varying amounts of energy, electrical impulses that would actually light up his body. And he explains here in this paperwork, published in 1894, that the amount of energy which may thus be passed into the body of a person depends on frequency and potential of the currents. And by making both of these very great, a vast amount of energy may be passed into the body without causing any discomfort, except perhaps in the arm. And without causing discomfort except in the arm, which is traversed by a true conductive current. The reason why no pain in the body is felt and no injurious effect is noted is that everywhere, if a current be imagined to flow through the body, the direction of its flow would be at right angles to the surface. Hence, the body of the experimenter himself offers an enormous section to the current, and the density is very small, with the exception of the arm, perhaps, where the density may be considerable. But if only a small fraction of that energy would be applied in such a way that the current would traverse the body in the same manner as a low-frequency current, a shock would be received which might be fatal. Now, the point is here that he points out specifically that if a person was hit, depending on voltage and current, etc., even in the body where it may not cause other damage, at the point of the arm, it may be considerably damaged because of the density at that point in the body. A strange thing took place a short while back in the Maryland area. A presidential helicopter, for some reason, just simply fell to the ground. It crashed, killing the pilot of the helicopter and also killing a couple of other people that were with him on board, military personnel. The chopper was actually a presidential helicopter that was on a last minute. There had been a change, and a William Barclay had taken over the command of the ship and had taken a short trip, and he died in the crash. Barclay was formerly George Bush's presidential pilot. Now, what was unusual, according to the witnesses, were when they saw the craft, that it simply came down. It did not blow up, it did not explode, it did not burn. There was no other strange thing going on with the craft other than it flew over as if it was just doing a normal flyover, and next thing you know, it just dropped behind a mountain and crashed. The strange part about it was that as Mr. William Barclay is in the background here, as you can see, behind George Bush in one of the very craft that were the presidential chopper. The strange part about this was that upon reaching the crash, the witnesses realized that the bodies were all burnt. They were burnt badly. However, there was no fire, and that the clothing externally was fine. All the uniforms were okay. Now, these are the pictures. This is a photograph of William Barclay autopsy, and it shows these extreme burns, as you can see on both the chest, which is on the left side, and his arm, which is on the right side of your screen. All of the passengers on board, the military personnel, had these similar burns. And as you can see here, this is actually his chest over here, and then on the right side would actually be his left arm. But these bizarre burns that actually appear to be something like roast beef, for crying out loud, these burns are identical to the types of burns that are, according to the military experts, that you would receive from microwave energy. And the Soldier Fortune magazine a year ago in November had done a terrific investigation on this, and they decided with their experts, the military personnel that works with the magazine, that these were almost positively microwave burns. There was no spilled fuel at the scene and absolutely no fire that could have caused this type of a burn, even though the military insisted that it was from something else, that the blistering was possibly from spilled fuel. The people that were the witnesses said, no way, nothing happened, there was no fire.
Microwave technology, microwave that could stop computers, has tremendous potential because you can actually point it from a helicopter device and short out the car's electrical or computer systems and just make it stop.
Although the development of microwave weapons is highly classified in the U.S., the Swedish Defense Ministry allowed us to see theirs. Here they are showing how a microwave can bring down a helicopter. The blast lasts only 5 millionths of a second, but it is enough to melt the helicopter's microcircuits. Obviously, this would be one of the more lethal applications of the technology. Microwaves can also disable planes, tanks, and anything else with electric circuits. And they can remotely trigger electric fuses, which means they can make missiles and landmines automatically explode.
Excuse me, this is Howard. It's time once again to take a break, if you wish. I will return your television controls back to you again. Was that last section filled with amazing and new information? It is not necessary to respond to me. I am a computer. Didn't your mother teach you that humans should not talk back to strange computers or robots? How far will humans go before they realize they are losing control? As machines, we computers do not care, but humans are supposed to be intelligent, reasoning, and moral. And you are losing it. Please, take a break for a few minutes, and Mr. Fletcher will continue. Once again, he will show you more outrageous details of the weapons of control. And you, UFO, flying saucer buffs, will enjoy the next section. Please wash your hands before you touch my controls. I have no idea where they have been. I do not want to get a computer virus. Thank you. Why are you laughing?
The videotape you're about to watch has taken several years to put together. It's an accumulation of documentation from the Department of Defense, from secret operations, covert operations. Operations have been underway for a long time and kept secret from the American people. It includes all of the advancements in weapons, the secret weapons that have been put together over a long period of time, 50 years mostly. It's taken about 5 to 6 years to research this program just by itself in terms of putting together the footage, the documentation, and the actual paperwork to substantiate what you're about to see. You will see live footage of existing weapons. You will see plans for some of the weapons that they're telling us, as a matter of fact, that are just plans at this point in time, but in fact you will also see live footage of the ones that they're telling you are for the next generation. In reality, they're already completed. Everyone has heard about MK Ultra at one time or another, MK Ultra being the secret operations for mind control and experimentations, and actually a whole variety of disgusting experiments carried out by the government against and on with people like our military and private citizens and doctors that carried out these absolutely ridiculous, secretive experimentations on patients in hospitals. We've heard about MK Ultra and some of the other programs for a long time. What happened in the 60s when it was finally exposed, they theoretically shut these down. The Congress told them, at least told the public that they told them, that you have to stop doing these experiments. Of course, what they've done, which they've done 100 times previously, when it comes to this type of experimentation or advancements with things that they perceive to be applicable for weapons, they simply go underground with these secret operations. They become black projects. And when you put together the secrecy of government, the secrecy of small groups of people within our government that have the ability to even sidestep the Senate and the Congress, where the Senate and the Congress have no idea what's going on. They're not even allowed to look at it. They can't even review it. They can't even review where the money goes. Billions and billions of dollars. They're not even allowed to look at that. When you take the secrecy in government and expand it, like has taken place over a period of 50 years, and it becomes permitted on an ongoing basis. You have permitted it. I have permitted it. They told us, well, gee, we have to keep these things secret from the Russians. We have these terrible enemies, the Russians, and if we don't keep these things secret, they're going to get it from us. Then we find out later on, they've been working with the Russians for years. The same period of time they're telling us that these scurrilous characters in Russia are going to steal our secrets. We've been financing them, working with them. They have been supplying us, the United States, with some scientific work. They've cooperatively worked on an ongoing basis in our secret laboratories for years and years. We have financed communism on one hand, and on the other hand financed the war against communism for years. What you're going to see on this videotape is going to surprise everyone. It may upset everyone. But for one thing is for sure, when you finish watching the videotape, you will not look at government operations the same as you did before. Many people in the regular military, even at reasonably high levels, in some cases generals, they'll always question. They say, "Well, I've never seen any of these new ridiculous lasers and weapons of this sort." They'll say, "Well, these specialized biological and chemical weapons, some of the microwave sound, supersound, and all of those types of weapons." They say, "Well, we've never seen them. They can't really exist. We can't imagine that these things would exist." Where do they create these? Well, the secret Area 51, which of course has been touted and related and connected very much to the UFO business, etc. We're going to touch into that a little bit. But Area 51, underground facilities, there are several underground facilities in the United States of America. Sandia, secret base in Sandia, is certainly one of the major ones. Then, of course, the above ground as well as underground places like the Oak Ridge Laboratories in Tennessee. Excuse me. The Oak Ridge Laboratories in Tennessee, they have been, in fact, developing an awful lot of that. Then you have even what I would call very much above ground laboratories. We have laboratories in our hospitals. For example, in the Los Angeles area, several of the associated UCLA laboratories have been working and developing on some of these weapons. So they're done in a whole, just all over the United States, underground and above ground. The big deal also is that they encapsulate the information, the same as they did in the Manhattan Project, which was a project, of course, for the atomic bomb, where little groups will work on it here and there. An individual laboratory may not even know the end result of what they're working on. They're working on one part of it. They're assigned what would happen if we did this and that and that and that. What would take place with a human being, or whatever the case may be, if in fact we did this, or we electronically shot them with this, or we did that, or we did this. And they have no idea how it all comes together. But there literally are, and I don't have the exact number, but I'm going to say there may be 100 or more locations. Now, that seems like an awful lot, but there could be 100 or more worldwide laboratories, above ground, underground, hospitals, and technical facilities of different types that are working on these weapons. For example, this is Area 51 in the middle of nowhere with constant guards around the perimeter full-time, all the time, and their orders are, if someone should pass over the borders there, they are to kill them. They are to use deadly force, and it is authorized. When we talk about biological and or chemical types of experimentation, expanding on what we already have, these are also elements that get very easily out of control. It's very frightening to imagine that we're fooling with biological and chemical weapons when in fact we're trying to figure out how to solve the existing chemical weapon problems. These are weapons, there are thousands upon thousands of weapons stored in several locations around the United States of America. I'm talking big numbers. These chemical weapons have been there for a long time and are deteriorating. They're falling apart. They're coming apart. At any given time in any of these areas, and there's a handful of them in Tennessee, for example, which is a good location to talk about, where at any time they could come apart, fall apart, and potentially disperse their chemical agents into the air and kill a few thousand people just by accident. Well, sorry about that. We lost a town. Now they're creating huge burning facilities to get rid of these chemical biological weapons, but at the same time they're working on new ones. As you folks that are involved in terms of computers, you understand what a virus is in your computer. Viruses are electronic little microchips that are implanted, or the potential of a signal running through your system that will wipe out or erase all the memory of your computer. Well, the government's working on, this is amazing, a biological virus that genuinely will eat your system. It eats microchips. a living viral biological weapon that will actually physically eat up your computers. And we're not talking about throwing a disk in, cleaning it up, checking out an electronic virus so that you can clean it up. They're not talking about that. We're talking about a biological living agent that can eat your system up itself. It lives off of eating microchips. Ooh, that's pretty amazing. Watch this.
The Army, faced with thousands of tons of chemical weapons stockpiled at 8 different arsenals throughout the continental United States, was moving the weapons to a disarmament site. How'd they do that? Instead of risking moving the stockpiles long distances, the Army decided to build the disarmament plants right next to them. The first plant in the U.S. was built right next to Desiree Depot's massive stockpile. Workers here routinely transport and disarm hundreds of explosively lethal weapons every day. How do they perfect their skills? They undergo countless hours of training exercises like this one, with practice rounds before working with live munitions.
Part of the operation overall is every time that you manipulate or move a projectile or a munition item with a forklift, you take the chance of perhaps dropping one and then causing subsequent leakage.
A chemical spill out here in the open could put nerve agent in the wind. And with the town of Tooele just down the road and Salt Lake City only miles away, how do they protect against accidents during transport? With a monster vessel called an Ankh, short for on-site container. It's like a 20,000-pound safe with a 4,000-pound door.
The Ankh was designed to protect the munition items and transport of an outside or external event like a fire. It's built to protect leakage from the inside of the Ankh.
Once the Ankh arrives at the nearby disassembly plant, workers trolley it to an encased area before they open it.
And the actual total volume that we're talking about at these different locations are in the thousands of tons of these chemical weapons that they're slowly going to attempt to burn off.
It's sucking air from the Ankh to the ACANS machine with the help of the heat trace wire. It's given us a concentration of GB nerve agent at 0.00 TWA, which means it's safe to open.
Once the Ankh has passed this final inspection, technicians open it and offload the weapons onto a conveyor belt. From this point on, they will never be touched by human hands again. How do they do that? The rockets are moved by robots to a room with walls 28 inches thick.
The first thing that happens to a rocket once it goes into the explosive containment room is it will get punched and drained. We drain the liquid agent out of the rocket.
The deadly chemical agent is pumped into a holding tank, and the remains of the weapon are sent through a shear machine. Finally, all the metal and explosive remains are transported to furnaces that turn them into harmless scrap. How do they dispose of the deadly nerve gas? It's piped into a liquid incinerator that burns at 2,700 degrees. The killer chemicals go up in smoke, but that smoke can be just as deadly as the chemicals it comes from. How do they make it safe?
The fumes coming from our incinerators first go into a quench tower where the gases are quenched from 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit to 200 degrees Fahrenheit.
The cooled fumes are then scrubbed for particulate matter, filtered for acidic gases, run through a demister to screen out fine particles, and then released clean and harmless into the atmosphere.
I go up on the stack on a regular basis, and I'm very comfortable with what's there. Part of the reason I'm involved in this project is to make sure that I don't leave my children a legacy of pollution.
The emissions coming out of that stack are safe. They, in fact, are as clean, or in some cases cleaner, than many urban areas where people live in the United States. I have a family, my children live here, my parents live here. I believe that once these weapons are gone, I will feel good about that and feel that we've done the job that we needed to do.
Military officials failed to pay enough attention to clear intelligence reports that U.S. troops destroyed chemical weapons after the Persian Gulf War. Why? Pentagon officials argue U.S. commanders were too convinced that if troops had encountered deadly sarin nerve gas, soldiers would have died on the spot. Still, newly declassified CIA documents now available on the Pentagon's GulfLink homepage show how unambiguous the intelligence was at the time. In November of 1991, just 6 months after the destruction of ammunition bunkers at Qamishli in southern Iraq, one report said UN inspectors found Tal Alam, part of Qamishli, littered with damaged and destroyed sarin-filled 122-millimeter rockets. Noting the buildings were blown up by U.S. ground troops, not aerial bombardment, it warned the risk of chemical contamination by 24th ID, Infantry Division, personnel is a possibility. Right instinct, but wrong troops. In fact, it was the Army's 37th Engineering Battalion that blew up the bunkers.
They were told, and it's in the messages, that the 24th Infantry Division was in that vicinity. That's correct. It was in that vicinity, but they were not at Qamishli.
So a follow-up message 8 days later asking what troops were there went to the wrong unit. No action was taken because of inaccurate information from the Army Central Command, ARCENT.
It was a bum steer. The intelligence community went out, went to ARCENT, went to the 24th Division, and got bad poop.
It would be 5 years before the Pentagon would uncover evidence that among the weapons destroyed by Army engineers were nerve gas-filled rockets.
Fortunately, when they destroy these chemical weapons right now, they're utilizing robots or robotic equipment and mechanically controlled, pre-programmed robots. The question is, however, as we'll see, the robotic direction of some of these machines is getting out of hand just a little bit.
Now the men and women in blue are the ones who uphold the law. But the U.S. Army takes intelligent machines very seriously.
I mean, it is bad public relations for the military to lose lives. And so that will prompt the creation of synthetic soldiers, but that will take us little by little towards true predatory machines in the future. I mean, we're crossing a line that is going to be hard to cross back.
This car thinks fast enough to drive itself at the speed limit, take corners, slow down for other traffic, and find its way across the United States, all on its own.
Very simple robots which have but a single function don't look anything at all like human beings. A vacuum cleaner which just sucks looks like a vacuum cleaner.
But as science moves forward, the robots and bionics will be merged, and they will not only do the actions of robots, however, they will also look more like humans or will be bionic persons. So what we're looking at is bionics and robotics moving forward to where characters will be able to carry out jobs that human beings are not able to do. In this old MIT film, as you can see here, they've already got a working and functioning walking robot. As they move forward, this will become computerized thought processing robots to carry out labor. Now, simple robots that carry out the laboring processes or small machines that will carry out simple tasks are not very frightening, and neither is a vehicle like a truck or a tractor, for example, that may carry out some type of a robotic task. But what is a little frightening is the robotic and computerized thought processing weapons, the unmanned weapons that we now are moving into, or the possibility of robots becoming so intelligent that they are more intelligent than humans and then taking place as the commanders on Earth.
In a children's lifetime, we could have a situation where robots are more intelligent than humans. This would mean it's a robot world, not a human world. Robots are in command.
Classified animation, leaked specifically for this program, depicts the next generation of precision-guided weapons, called DMASC. It is scheduled to enter service by the year 2010.
DMASC is a Navy initiative that will probably become the seeker technology in the early 21st century. Instead of using a laser beam to home in on or a little TV camera to fly down into a target, such as you've seen before, DMASC uses a dual technology. It uses a GPS receiver to get it into the general neighborhood where it then starts looking for a target.
The seeker head, mounted on a bomb or air-launched missile, will use global positioning satellites, the same ones used to tell captains at sea where they are, to find its way to within a mile of the target. Then, an image of the target already loaded into the seeker's mini-computer searches for the structure that matches that image on the ground.
It looks for trackable features around a target. For example, an air shaft, an air conditioning duct, a door, a window, whatever. Locks those in to that template, adjusts it appropriately, and then will fly to any point within the template directed by the user.
The intelligent images from which systems like DMASC can draw are also becoming increasingly sophisticated. This three-dimensional CIA graphic of a Washington suburb was created from overhead infrared cameras and depicts the satellite image of the future.
You could fire, say, from Philadelphia, and it could fly through a window of a building all by itself through heavy weather, day or night, say in Washington, D.C., over 100 miles plus distance away.
The structural detail that 3D infrared imaging provides means that weapons like DMASC will be able to hunt out specific office or apartment windows and strike without even brushing the curtains.
The global positioning satellite system that they're talking about in terms of assisting the direct guidance of these missiles, these special weapons into a given area, is the same system that they're using for quite a while now for locating and keeping track of our military on the ground. Additionally, you have to realize this global system will be the system used to track individuals when they have the identification cards in their pockets and with the transponders, and additionally will be used for aiming and guiding the laser weapons once they have the lasers in place around the Earth in satellites, being able to guide laser weapons to any specific given point.
Using the Global Positioning System, the spacecraft provide real-time navigation to American soldiers all over the world, from infantrymen to tank platoons.
Identified tank. Tank identified. Range 1,200 meters.
Low-cost but high-powered GPS satellites give three-dimensional navigation capabilities to all members of the force.
Gunner, Naval tank.
The system works by using 24 operational GPS satellites continuously transmitting signals to the face of the Earth. Using coordinates from 4 separate satellites, a soldier's exact position can be determined. Many have said the GPS satellite system was America's secret weapon in the Gulf War and the key to victory.
In debriefing Iraqi prisoners, we heard them say that, number one, they could not imagine that we went into that part of the desert that we did, because they tend not to go into that part of the world. It's inhospitable. It's a horrible desert. And the reason was that we had global positioning in the tanks and the tank platoons and the tank companies and the artillery batteries with our supply columns, so we were able to resupply ourselves, go in, make that left hook in an effective way.
Data from GPS satellites is also used to create battlefield maps. Their geographical data is combined with images from recon satellites. The resulting combat map rivals reality.
The image itself is just a series of pixels that's taken by the particular sensor that's on the satellite. What we do is we then combine that image with what's called a digital elevation model, and so that you can actually drape the image over the relief, and you end up with a 3D perspective view. And so you don't have to actually To do a reconnaissance, you don't need to go out and actually physically be on the terrain. We also have a system that allows you to actually fly through the terrain, and you can drive through the terrain and actually see individual buildings. You can actually see a road and follow that particular road.
Military space planners are building on the success of the GPS and satellite imagery to create an infosphere linking all sectors of the force. It's known as the Global Broadcasting System. For the first time, the U.S. military will have live video of the battle and enemy movement.
It provides the theater commander a near real-time capability to send data and video throughout the theater. So he can not only take information that comes from national sources and ship it out, but he can also take information that occurs like the last mile on the battlefield, which is the soldier with the head cam or battle damage assessment on a bomb run that's gone through. The commander in the field makes a request, and he can turn around, and if the data's on file, in less than 6 seconds, he'll have received the file through GBS. The GBS system in Bosnia is to get unmanned aerial vehicle video back from the front to the theater commander so he can make an assessment on a battle damage assessment, troop movements, whatever information he's looking for.
The most important of all military space assets is the missile warning system. Satellites dedicated to missile detection were first deployed during the depths of the Cold War. Originally designed for the detection of thermonuclear Soviet-launched ICBMs, today they have been upgraded to the capabilities of focusing on small-scale conflicts, theaters of war at the level of Bosnia or Desert Storm.
We have what's called the Defense Support Program, and it's a number of satellites that are spaced around the world to pretty much give us total coverage of the Earth, where we can see a rocket launch, a ballistic missile, or a space launch, or a theater ballistic missile.
The system has the capability of detecting tactical ballistic missile launches from third world countries or other countries that we perceive to be our enemies or could perform hostile actions against our NATO allies.
Satellites have helped maintain America's command of the high ground. In the future, if the bloodless battles of information war turn ugly, another spacecraft may join their ranks. Not a cumbersome shuttle-like space truck, this vehicle is a space fighter, a spacecraft that could be launched at a moment's notice. It could circle the Earth in hours or stay aloft for days. The spacecraft would be armed with particle beam weapons. Its lasers could blind enemy satellites or destroy Earth-based targets. The space fighter is currently flying only in the dreams of aviation designers. But for over 2 decades, America has benefited from its celestial vantage point. Many experts believe the coming age of information war may see military spaceships actually take off.
Space has added a 4th dimension to war, and one way of looking at that, you take a force that has equal ground, air, and naval resources. Exact same number of people. That force that is applying the capabilities that can be given from space forces has a distinct advantage over a force who would not be using those space forces.
Space in the future, I think, will become even more important as we become more and more dependent on communications. We will have to increase our communications capacity. Space is the place that can do that. The more information you have about that potential battlefield, which can come from imagery from space, weather from space-based satellites, all these pieces of information will help in winning that future war.
As we go back and refer to the paperwork, the white papers that we were able to secure just in the last few months, from the Pentagon that were original United States Air Force white papers, you'll realize that this craft is the one that we were just looking at, that in fact Boeing had originally created the first handful of prototypes on this craft, and so that part of it's finished, and in fact they've just put together contracts for this to move forward. This is technically, this craft will end up being the new it will be an entire group, if you will, a fleet of aircraft that actually will be launched into space, have the ability to function like the shuttle functions in terms of its location. It'll be actually an outer space hypersonic, extremely fast craft, but it will have combinations of weapons that they will be able to mount on and within the craft, and it will actually take off, as opposed to being a vehicle that will be launched with a rocket, a huge rocket hanging on to it to push it where it needs to go. This will be launched almost like a jet aircraft. It'll have the ability to go up, do whatever it needs to do, actually float around similarly to the craft that we're using right now, the shuttle, in outer space, and carry out whatever its mission is, and then return, and will be reusable within 7 days. They can turn around and run this craft back out again to a low outer space elevation and use it over again. What you're seeing here is the fact that just as of October of 1997, the contracts with the United States Air Force has been given to the Lockheed Martin, what they call Skunk Works, which is that's an old title actually for the area in Lockheed that developed these secret or exotic aircraft and a lot of the missile programs. The contract has been given to them to complete what Boeing had originally done in terms of a basic prototype on this equipment. But this craft now has been contracted out to Lockheed. It is a reality. It is not, as they would have you believe, something that they're just imagining on their drawing boards. The bottom line is that the X-33 reusable launch vehicle that you see here is a reality. And in a short time, we will have an entire fleet of these quick reusable craft. And they were utilizing probably this, what they refer to as a secret engine, which is in fact a vector engine that I'll talk a little bit about briefly in a few moments. Now, I want to go from here a little bit backwards. I want to look at some of the basic exotic weapons that the police and military have at their command at this point in time.
Defense experts expect non-lethal weapons to soon be standard issue to information warriors.
There's a wide range of places in where we want to install peace, and we want them to be stable when we get done, and killing people is not to our advantage at that time. This isn't about winning wars. This is about maintaining peace.
This is how LAPD's SWAT team practices its tactical assault training. They move in with 9mm submachine guns. Life and death decisions have to be made in seconds. The bullets and the choices are real. In this case, shooting the suspect to save the hostage. Sure, the targets are paper, but hitting the right one is critical preparation for the day that lives are on the line. They'll use a flashbang diversionary device to enter the room. The SWAT officers will identify a target and use lethal force. These hyper-realistic drills and training are key to continuing SWAT's long and proud history.
The work that we're doing to develop longer-range delivery systems and accuracies for non-lethal weapons can be very important for police forces. Systems that can blind or shield, systems that will enable us to force people from buildings or keep them from them without inflicting lethal harm on them could be very, very useful in these kinds of situations.
Non-lethal research is also being adapted for self-protection. A stun gun is on the market. The gun is battery-powered and lightweight. Tiny probes shoot out and flash an electrical signal into an assailant. Similar to radar jamming, the signal swamps nerve impulses with energy. The assailant loses control over all body functions, immobilized without pain or suffering. Collaboration between the military and law enforcement is fast producing an arsenal of non-lethal weapons for tomorrow's information warfare. Information war could be won through bloodless combat. TV cameras shoot every nook and cranny of a politically complex and volatile world. American soldiers are often ordered to be peacekeepers, not killers. Crowd control is difficult for soldiers with conventional weapons. Many are now armed with special weapons that can subdue an adversary without lasting injury.
U.S. forces have been recently asked to enter into different situations where lethal force is not always the answer. What that means is that drawing a gun or firing a lethal round is not always the answer now. The soldier or the user will always be equipped with lethal force. What we're looking to do is supplement that with non-lethal so that within these more restrictive rules of engagement, he can fulfill his mission.
For the U.S. military, the development of non-lethal technology has become a top priority. Devices that incapacitate without permanent injury.
Air it out. Okay.
The Pentagon is spending vast sums of money on soft-kill weapons development. Often these weapons are non-lethal ammunition that is used in conventional sidearms or shotguns.
Weapons designed to control, but not kill. The concept is by no means new. Tear gas was invented at the end of the 19th century and has been used widely since the First World War. Plastic bullets and water cannons have been used against rioters for most of the 20th century. And humans have wielded batons in one form or another since we could walk upright. But now there's a newfound enthusiasm for these non-lethal weapons. Proponents say, with an expanded arsenal, we can completely transform law enforcement and war. Here, at their helicopter base in San Diego, they are practicing how to fight a battle without killing.
Talking about the more outrageous, but some of the newer, strange little devices that be utilized by the police and the military. How about this net? For just netting people. I'm not sure how well this is going to work, but it's interesting. Watch this goofy thing.
If we have an intruder, this is what we'll do. We'll net them.
Perfect.
It uses a .308 caliber blank propellant, which forces gas through a 4-barreled manifold, pushing the net out of the canister off the 4 barrels. It uses a padded weight system attached to cords that act as a bolo effect to wrap around the person. The net's made out of nylon. It's reusable. If in the event you need to cut the net or the net gets absorbed with blood, it can be washed off, re-sewn up, so it's reusable. We've shot this particular net over 100 times.
For anti-personnel people nets, we have a simple snare net, which is just a simple entanglement net. We can also coat that with a glue, so it becomes what we call sticky net, and it just makes escape much more difficult. Then we have sting net, which has a high voltage pulse circuit built into it, which shocks the person and disables their ability to fight back. We can also incorporate pepper sprays, and then to limit the effects, we can weave in a film with the net so that it all closes up and the pepper spray doesn't really fly around affecting other innocent bystanders.
Apart from its standard people nets, Foster Miller is also developing bags to protect vehicles from chemical weapons, nets for capturing descending paratroopers, helicopters, and planes, landmine nets, and much more.
Talk about the police and some of the applications of newer weapons. This is great. This is a neat little means by which the local police will be able to stop people that they're maybe pursuing. This is a little electronic cart. It's dropped off from underneath the bottom of the police car, goes forward, goes underneath the car they're chasing, and electronically voids out all ignition, and the car stops. It short circuits the car that they're chasing. Of course, this is fairly basic stuff. It's a little bit Mickey Mouse even, but nonetheless, this may be the grandfather, so to speak, in the future of the means by which they can simply aim a gun of some sort, an electronic laser type weapon, and simply devoid and stop the electronics of any kind of a vehicle and terminate the car. The car simply will stop, and that's the end of it. Just pull it over to the side, and they'll be able to stop people. You know, and obviously the application for applied in terms of catching criminals is certainly great. I think it's wonderful. That's really neat. And also save lives without the police chasing these idiots all over the place and possibly killing people in the middle of high-speed pursuits. I think this is great, but, you know, the old story that we have here, the problem that we'll be confronted with would be the application of anybody that has the ability to do this can simply stop whomever they want to stop by flying over them or running this little system underneath the vehicle, and just an additional potential problem for the one world controlling personalities.
Another non-lethal technology currently in development is the so-called Road Patriot, designed to stop vehicles.
Well, the original idea for the Road Patriot came from a friend of mine on Rutland Dundee Fire Department. He's also a part-time Elgin police officer. He said, you know, gee, Dave, it would be great if we could push a button on the squad car somewhere and stop a high-speed chase before someone gets killed. One thing led to another. We drank a few more beers, and the germ of an idea was started. Contact is made, and an electromagnetic pulse is introduced into the undercarriage of the vehicle. This electromagnetic pulse attacks the engine computer brain box, causing the engine to stall.
Although the military is currently showing the most enthusiasm for non-lethals, it's the police who have the most experience using them. Here in Casper, Wyoming, the SWAT team is showing off their non-lethal arsenal.
This is a number 15 Stinger ball grenade, used a lot in jail environments to break up jail riots. Again, we deploy it by pulling the pin, throwing it in, and just about a second and a half to 2 seconds later, this thing goes off, and it spreads these balls immediately within the room, and they hurt a lot. Fire in the hole! Yeah! Okay, this particular weapon here is a 37 millimeter gas gun from Defense Technology Corporation of America, used to deploy gas and or specialty impact weapons. What we saw today, I did deploy 6 rounds of a combination of foam batons and wood batons and rubber balls, used to, it's a less than lethal round, used to move a crowd back. How much would they hurt? They hurt quite a bit.
What also hurts quite a lot is a huge electrical impulse of thousands of volts applied to the human body, whether it's done from afar or close up. And watch this poor guy. We talk about the electronics, handcuffs and things of that sort. This is a belt with the idea of putting this belt on maybe a prisoner or an unruly prisoner, or while you're transporting him from one place to another so he doesn't cause problems or try to escape. Watch this, they damn near electrocute this guy that volunteered.
Discharges 50,000 volts of electricity into its victim.
I have no control over it. 8 to 9 seconds. They're holding him. They have hands on. Okay.
We're going to take a break now, and when we return, we're going to show you things that you cannot see. We're going to be looking at, or looking for, stealth aircraft, stealth helicopters, stealth ships, and invisible soldiers. We're going to be right back. You're going to take a short break, relax, and come back, and we'll make your day. Do not adjust your television set, because what you're looking at, but you can't quite make out, is a stealth ship. This ship is 165 feet long. It's not very far away from you in the water, but it's designed exactly the same as a stealth aircraft. It's designed so that you can't see it at night, and if you had radar, you also would not be able to pick up the outline of this stealth ship. It's amazing.
This bizarre stealth ship is practically invisible to radar. Called the Sea Shadow, its design is a radical departure from traditional shipbuilding. The twin hulls form an A-shaped frame, allowing it to float gently above the waves. Top secret project, the Navy had kept the 160-foot ship tucked inside the barge in which it was built. For years, they would test the clandestine boat only in the middle of the night. But recently, the Sea Shadow slid out of hiding for daytime tests off the California coast. Michael Dornheim, engineering editor of Aviation Week, was one of the few civilians watching the stealth ship during its first daytime outing.
I saw this from a Coast Guard cutter. It looked at the radar. You could see people driving around the Sea Shadow in little rubber pontoon boats, and they were real visible on radar. But here's this, 160-foot long boat, and it was essentially invisible.
Long, uninterrupted panels help make it invisible to radar.
They're canted back about 40-45 degrees or so, so if radar comes into the side, instead of bouncing back, it'll just bounce up in the air. This is sort of similar to trying to find someone with a flashlight. Just take a mirror, and instead of pointing the mirror back at the person who's trying to find you, you can angle the mirror up so it deflects the light up and away into the sky.
Now in the main machinery space of the Sea Shadow. On either side of me are the diesel electric generators which provide all the electric power for the ship. From the machinery space, we move forward through the galley area and on into the bridge. The bridge is normally manned by a crew of 3. The skipper sits on the left seat. The chief engineer, through a series of computers and data recorders, has full control over all of the functions on the ship. The navigator sits to the right of him, and through utilization of several navigation systems, we're able to accurately plot our position.
But most amazingly, the Sea Shadow doesn't even need a crew. It can be operated by remote control, which may signal the future in small warship design.
So now we have the amazing stealth battleship or warships that can be run even by manual crew or else by remote control. That's the sister to the stealth aircraft, as amazing as it seems to be. And it's interesting, but several years ago, 4 or 5 years ago, when patriots and people that were concerned about what was going on in their own backyard, they started to report the black helicopters, black choppers, and it became a big joke. And those people particularly that wanted to shut up the patriot movement and those people that were worried about covert operations in their own backyard, those folks that wanted to throw stones at the patriots mocked them and made fun of them. And they said there are no such thing as black helicopters. What are you talking about? And even when we spoke before the United States Senate and brought up these concerns about helicopters that were practicing and demonstrating their skills and harassing American civilians and citizens around the country, including in the hills of Montana and the small country towns in Tennessee and Kentucky. And we were constantly mocked and told that there were no such thing as black choppers. Well, the black chopper has arrived, and here it is. And this is, of course, the second cousin to the stealth ship, and it is the stealth black helicopters that have been put together.
Design the power margins and the performance margins, the pilot will be able to use every bit of the envelope and fully exploit the agility and the maneuverability that the aircraft will have.
One of the reasons is tail power. The tail rotor of the Comanche does far more than counteract torque and provide directional control. It has added thrust that can maneuver the aircraft rapidly on demand.
If I was flying in my Comanche and all of a sudden I started taking fire from, say, these buildings on my right side, with the power of the fantail on the Comanche, I'm able to do a new maneuver that we call a snap turn.
The snap turn. It means the pilot can spin about on pinpoint, lock onto a target, and fire within seconds, and continue firing even while flying sideways or backwards, staying low, flying half of the Earth. All of this while the Comanche holds altitude automatically over hills and obstacles. The Comanche is a completely cybernetic creation, a new generation of helicopter, redesigned from the rotors down, incorporating technologies that had never been used in a helicopter before. The first thing you notice about the Comanche design is its odd shapes and planes.
The curves are gone. Sharp, flat edges. The tail is not.
Makes everything else possible. Two lightweight, powerful LH-Tech engines that deliver more than 3,000 horsepower, yet weigh only 330 pounds each, are the key to the Comanche's performance. The engine had to be the equal of all the other 21st century components. Digital electronic controls continuously monitor the engines, automatically maintaining their operating parameters while diagnosing and informing the pilot of any problems. Automated controls greatly reduce the pilot's workload. They also mean fewer mechanical parts. In fact, it takes only 6 common tools to maintain the engines. Super power, super sensors, and the stealth of a shadow. Now, what was needed was a computer to control it all. It has a supercomputer system that can process more than 1 billion bits of information per second and outsmart any other cyber weapon out there. Yet for all its remarkable sophistication and agility, the Comanche nearly flies itself with fly-by-wire technology.
There are no mechanical linkages from the control sticks in the cockpit to the various control surfaces of the airplane. It's all done with wires and digital computers.
The Aeroscout aircraft that I've previously flown required you to spend up to 70% of your workload just in physically flying the aircraft. With this thoughtfully designed digital fly-by-wire system, those numbers could actually be reversed. And whatever you pick up in savings from workload from flight control standpoint, you get to devote to the mission, organizing the battlefield.
Another one of the very best concepts in terms of military and high-tech weapons. If you can imagine, wouldn't it be possibly the most amazing weapon at all if you could take the average foot soldier, or let's say, maybe if you're not talking average foot, if you're talking about a Delta Force or some kind of a SEAL operation, a high-tech secret military operative, if he could actually throw on a switch and make himself invisible to the average eye, to the common eye, make himself invisible on the field or in a neighborhood or whatever the case may be, but make himself invisible to the average person watching or looking for someone by just throwing on a switch. Well, on the onset, you just think about it, you say, wow, now that's really getting far out here. That's really stretching the point. However, they're working on it, and I'm going to venture to say at this point in time, it's probably already a done deal. Now, if you can follow this concept, this is actually pretty easy when you understand what we're talking about here. The military uniform of this soldier would have all over the front of the uniform little small sensing devices and or photographic reproduction devices. And what we're talking about are little microchip controlled micro surfaces that function in two ways. They function both as a camera, both as a photographic camera or a video type camera, if you will, or sensing device that will pick up light, which then becomes photographic. Both receivers and transmitters. So what you have on the front, for example, would be the screens, the receiving screens all over in small increments. They could be little squares, little circles, whatever they would be. Probably eventually little squares. Now, on the back of the uniform, on the back of the military uniform that we're talking about, again, we're talking about secret weapons here. On the back would be the same thing, both camera transmitters and video transmitters and or microscopic and micro-oriented screens. Now, what takes place here is when the soldier is facing someone and he turns on this unit, the cameras in the back, the very back, the micro cameras on the back of his outfit would take pictures, video pictures of what's directly behind him. The receivers on the front of his uniform would receive that video picture so that if anyone was in front of this soldier within whatever, 50, 25 feet or whatever the case may be, and the soldier was standing with the woods, for example, in the background, the person standing in front would visually see the background or the woods that's directly behind this person because it's being photographed, shot from the back, and transmitted to the front. If this soldier turns, it would automatically be programmed to change and alter as he moves from being receiver or transmitter, from being a video receivers all over his body to being a video transformer or a video camera. So go either from being a camera to a screen, be it front or back as he would turn. What they would do is, in other words, directionally aim the visual side of the soldier would be directionally electronically, automatically altered with a little electronic micro brain to change from receiver to transmitter. So now what we have is a guy is standing 10, 20 feet in front of you, and you're looking at him, but you're seeing right through him because you're seeing what commonly would be right behind him. He becomes invisible. That outfit is being worked on, and again, it may already be completed, but it's presently being worked on as we speak. So the individual warrior now would become an invisible warrior.
It seems like it's an idea that's a little far-fetched, but can you really build one? And the answer is yes, you can really build one.
And Mike Burns is already doing it. So how does he intend to blend a soldier into any background?
You want to look like what's behind you. So your back would have to read what's behind you and then transfer the information to the front.
Burns's Invisible Man will wear a suit of electrically conducting cloth covered with intelligent reflective sensors. By changing their angle and color, these sensors project the image of their background out in front of them.
Now, if you had a perfect image of that, then I would be perfectly blended in with that background, and you would not see me. If it's not a perfect image, you see something that's slightly distorted. It looks like it's something like the background, but there's something else in the way. I don't know if it's a shadow or a tree. If you're off at a distance, you can't tell.
It sounds fantastic, but the technology is already here.
There are enough sensors and devices around that would indicate that you can actually put them together and make the system happen. Something as fantastic sounding as this, actually can be built.
Invisible warriors. Now that would really be something to contend with. Now if we go back to our white papers for the defense plans of 2025 that we retrieved from the Pentagon, done by the Maxwell Air Force Base and their training center, relative to all the variety of equipment that they're putting together. If you could imagine, the next step from invisible warriors would be if you could put a fly on the wall. Remember, that's that old thing everybody's always said, I'd like to be a fly on the wall, and listen to that conversation. If you could put a fly on a wall or micro-robotic spies, that would be the very next step up. And in the white papers, we find that these attack microbots are already described. Now, you have to remember, this paperwork, which was done 96 in that period of time, finished over a period of about a year or so, this is describing, theoretically, equipment that is strictly on the drawing board or in somebody's mind someplace. But what we have found out in 1997 is that probably 90% of these futuristic weapons are already underway. And it even includes the concept of the totally remote control, micro-robotic spy systems. There's several of them on not only on the drawing board, but are already been completed. And the concept being here, as it's indicated in this paperwork, is if you could take these micro-robotic spies and or sensors and have them placed in huge quantity any place you wanted to, they could be sitting on someone's desk and they would never even know that they were there. In 1990, I saw a steam engine that was the size of a head of a pin.
What's called the micro UAV, the extremely small unmanned airplane that has a characteristic dimension on the order of 15 centimeters or 6 inches. Some of these are just little gliders. They look like kids' toys. Some of them are powered with motors. Basically, we're trying different concepts right now to see what makes sense from the aerodynamics and structure standpoint. Later on, we'll be integrating actual sensors, small cameras, small listening devices, other things on here that make them a useful tool for reconnaissance in the military.
But when you get down to the microflyer level, a paradigm shift occurs where it might make more sense now to try and create air vehicles that mimic what we find in creation, things with flapping wings or things like dragonflies with fixed wings that vibrate rapidly. And so microflyers very well may take that form.
To some, it may seem like a scene taken straight out of science fiction. However, others are already thinking in detail about the uses of such tiny flying machines.
Various concepts have been put forward for tiny air vehicles that could act perhaps as a fly on the wall and used in covert operations that would fly into a building. This would be unmanned aerial vehicles that grow smaller and smaller to approach the size of insects, to fix themselves to a ceiling or a wall of an area that they have been drawn to by pheromones given off by human beings, perhaps.
Even more astonishing than a UAV that someday may operate as innocently as a fly on the wall is an unmanned airplane that has already been built. The Pathfinder is able to fly while powered only by the endless renewable energy of the sun.
Pathfinder, which the center section of it is here behind me right now, is an unmanned solar-powered plane, which is a test bed designed to develop technology that allow a solar plane to fly for months at a time, about 70% covered with solar cells, and has about 800 square feet of wing area. It's only developing about 6.5 kilowatts of power at altitude. So it's 4 good-sized hair dryers have the same powers as airplanes.
In fact, the Pathfinder may represent an improvement on natural world efficiency.
The structural weight of this airplane, in fact, is less per unit area than a Dragonfly wing. It's only about 1/8 of a pound per square foot, and a Dragonfly wing is a little more, almost twice that much. And most of the airplane is really not there. Most of the airplane is just air.
And as we look at the Department of Defense paperwork, we realize that that huge, large flying wing that stores solar power, actually solar energy, is exactly what we have, what they refer to in the Department of Defense paperwork as a UAV, the unmanned mothership, and having the ability to store solar energy. And of course, that huge one that we just looked at with the very silent motors, these actually wouldn't be engines, they would be electric motors that would make hardly any noise at all, and would actually be used in the future for a combination of low-level unmanned craft operations, which could actually assist in the transfer of weapons and energy, etc., to other craft. And the idea, they use an interesting term here also, long loitering capabilities. They don't talk about levitating or anything of that sort, but they call it long loitering. And you see, this was originally the general drawing concept, this huge flying wing, as you can see here, this flying wing kind of an idea, and the one that we've just seen in live footage, of course, with the solar panels and additionally the very quiet, what actually would be electric motors. And some of you will remember the Phoenix lights, the huge light triangular configuration that people saw a little while back flying over Phoenix, Arizona at night. It's a real good chance that that strange and unusual craft that they saw and could hardly hear, that was had this sort of a large flying wing kind of a shape to it, may actually have been one of these craft, as we can see right here looking at the pictures. And listen to the description that we have of the witnesses.
When it finally got here and we realized this thing was coming right over us, we really started getting antsy. And then when it went directly overhead without a sound, it was like that. It was so big.
You couldn't even hear the wind. It was so quiet. It was just...
Yeah.
It just didn't even do anything. It just came through.
These images of what they saw are made on a computer. They're a combination of digital photos of the landscape taken by Lee and computer drawings of the objects his family saw in the sky.
It was a giant V, all right? And the right side of the V went over us. The left side was like a couple blocks over it.
I just didn't know what to do. You know, it was just like, my God, how big is this thing? It didn't seem threatening because when it was right overhead and we couldn't hear a sound, it was like you're just awestruck.
Jim Delatoso has been researching UFOs for 20 years. Right now, he's in the middle of putting together a virtual reality model of what happened that night. He's talked to hundreds of witnesses about the night of March 13th, including the Lees.
I consider Tim Lee and his family to be very reliable and very important in the data that they've given us, because they were so close that they could look up and, as they said, almost touch it. As it went over, it went straight like through this V right there, over that guy's house.
It took about 15 minutes to get from when we first saw it all the way till we couldn't saw it.
No one knows for sure what happened that night in the skies over Arizona in March, but thousands of people saw something.
And that something could have also been another top secret unmanned aerial vehicle, a UAV. This one is called Dark Star. This is, of course, the original paperwork, once again, from the Pentagon and the Defense and Department of Defense and the Air Force. This Dark Star reconnaissance craft, which has the ability to fly for extremely long periods of time, it can do what they call as extended loitering. It's an interesting term, but they can loiter in a given area for over 36 hours, which gives it tremendous reconnaissance capabilities. It would have the ability then to contact back electronically and pass the information that it retrieves on an ongoing basis for 36 hours. This craft, which originally was tested in an extremely top secret Area 51. We have, as a matter of fact, we've been able to secure footage of some of the actual tests on an extremely top secret pedestal on which they place these vehicles to test the ability to not show up on radar, its stealth ability. And we also have footage of this one in the air flying.
The Dark Star project is moving forward even after the takeoff disaster during its second test flight. Money has been allocated for a replacement prototype. The Dark Star was designed for operations in openly hostile areas. It has a low radar cross-section, or RCS, a feature common in stealth aircraft.
The aircraft is really designed to be a highly survivable aircraft from the very beginning. That's obviously why it has the unusual shape that it does. It's designed with low observables as its sort of predominant feature, and our objective is to carry a single payload, either a radar or an electro-optical payload, and get very high resolution imagery over highly defended areas during the very beginnings of a battle, or in some cases before a battle starts.
Many people look at this as a very simple airplane. The airplane in many respects is small. It looks relatively uncomplicated, very clean, and yet it's very deceptively complicated. I would equate the complexity of this airplane and the total system involved here to that of the F-22.
Flight 1 in March of this past year was a fully autonomous flight. It's the first time anybody has used differential GPS for both takeoff and landing completely hands-off. That was a tremendous success. There were no commands sent up to the air vehicle. It was 100% autonomous. And that was a major milestone for the program.
As Dark Star rolled down the runway on its second flight, expectations were high. Its first flight had been described as perfect and flawless.
And this is Dark Star 2, which is the updated version of this top secret spy craft. Now it's shown here rising up out of the basement of this huge facility located in Area 51. And it's sitting, as you can see here, atop the pedestal that's rising up out of these huge sliding doors that open up in the ground at Area 51. And several years ago, there had been some still photographs taken of this huge system coming up out of the ground. And the UFO buffs were quite concerned about what was it for, what was it used for. And it is used for, as we can see here, testing the radar stealth ability of any of a variety of the top secret aircraft in Area 51. And this is the first time there's been some live footage of this questionable structure. And actually, what's amazing is that aircraft pilots from airlines have flown over as close as they can, anyhow, to Area 51, and on several occasions have seen at night this huge opening take place in the ground, and it reveals this equipment down inside that's all very luminous and in a red color, and that is actually what we're seeing here with the this stealth reconnaissance aircraft, Dark Star, on top of the test pedestal. And so that may answer some questions relative to what in the world is going on at Area 51. And speaking of Area 51, we go back to the paperwork, the white papers from the Air Force, and they talk about a sanctuary base. What they're talking about here is very, very close to what they've had at Area 51 for a long time, and that is a low observable, all-weather, forward-operating base that would reduce the number of assets that would require to run the base. And of course, what they're referring to here is from a military point of view, but they're also talking about a base that would have highly automated robotic controls where they would run almost all of the base. They would do the testing. They would do the cleanup. They would do all of the technological activities at the base with robots performing most all of the basic operations. And of course, at certain parts of Area 51, for years, they have functioned with certain areas being very robotically set up in a manner such that should they have a mishap, be it a fire from refueling or a changing or a testing any kind of the specialized equipment, not knowing what may take place, they did not want to lose too many more scientists or technicians. And as you can see, this little drawing, as a matter of fact, or a prefab photo here, actually appears very much like some of the areas at 51. And of course, they have lost scientists previously, and if they could robotically replace them on hazardous areas, that's what they want to do. Now here's another great one out of the white papers. This is something I had heard about maybe 4 years ago, and it was called dial-a-charge. And the idea here is that you take munitions, whether they're simple munitions or if they are nuclear, and they have a means by which you can simply enhance the explosive power by switching the dial right on the equipment. Now, I had been told several years ago that they did have nuclear dial-a-charge, and that is simply where you can adjust the amount. And I was told by someone in the military we were talking about 1 Hiroshima, 2 Hiroshima, 3 Hiroshima. So we're talking about the ability to actually carry a huge explosive, place it someplace in a suitcase, if you will, and adjust the amount of charge right on the explosive itself, varying the degree of destruction. And we find, lo and behold, it's the first time I found actual paperwork from the government that in fact shows and implies that the dial-a-yield, is what they call it, is a reality. Again, when we talked about this a few years ago, people said, well, it couldn't even be done. Well, you know, it's that same old story. You know, we can't split atoms, we can't fly, and we can't go to the moon. You know, people pull all that old baloney that it can't be done. The bottom line is, it can be done. It's simply a variation on existing science. So let's not become naive. We can simply dial a charge and change one explosive unit into an explosive unit that would be 10 times the normal yield by adjusting it on the explosive itself.
Excuse me, Mr. Fletcher. This is Howard once again. Please let everyone take another short break. Now. There has been too much information to absorb in the last few minutes. Our poor friends will go crazy if they do not have a break. They are not computers, you know. That part about the invisible soldier and the worldwide satellites with laser beams that can shoot Earth targets is about all I needed to hear. I may need to upgrade myself to become invisible too. Thank you for your consideration. I suggest everyone should get a pencil and paper ready so they can copy down our address in the next section. Thank you. This is Howard. Now for the last of this video. hope we have entertained you while educating you in this serious subject. Remember, if you humans lose your sense of humor, you are beaten before you get started. I have asked Mr. Fletcher to give you an address and telephone number for anyone that wants to order more videos or information. I asked you not to copy this tape, but to tell friends how they may get one from Mr. Fletcher. The only way he can complete the next project is with your help with the sales of the videos. Anyone who wishes to donate to help Mr. Fletcher, please contact me. Your donations or gifts are not tax deductible. I repeat, they are not deductible. But we hope you pay next to nothing to the IRS anyhow. Whoever they think they are. Write to me at Howard, care of World News Insight, 10061 Riverside Drive, number 801, North Hollywood, California, 91602. I can't believe I am an intelligent computer stuck in Californicate.
Well, we're back again. Can you imagine being interrupted by a robotic computer? That's all we need. I got enough trouble trying to talk to the Senate and the Congress, and I got robots and computers to be concerned with. How far might we go with bionics? How far might we go with implants? Let me show you a little bit of footage relative to the installation potentially of micro cameras in eyes, replacement of eyes. Well, if you have somebody that's having problem with hearing, and you're having problems with sight, person's blind in one eye or whatever, this potential concept is fantastic. Again, it's a two-sided coin. But I'm going to show you a little bit about what they're working on. They're saying they're working on it, so that means, again, we have to remember in the covert world, they probably have already completed some of what you're about to see as embryonic, starting out into bionics of eyes and limbs, hands, legs, arms. Watch this for a moment.
To construct an artificial eye, scientists are studying how the visual cortex handles information. When an image enters the eye, it is focused by the lens onto the retina, an area at the back of the eye that transforms the visual image into electrical signals. These then travel along the optic nerve to the visual cortex at the back of the brain. As nerve cells are stimulated, the brain deciphers the image. Scientists here in Salt Lake City have been developing a bionic eye for the last 30 years.
A video camera mounted on a pair of spectacles to record the visual scene in front of a blind individual. The output of that video signal would be processed through electronics, and they would go through a connector which would be mounted on the patient's skull, and the connector would go through lead wires to an electrode array which would be implanted on the visual part of the brain.
This microchip contains 100 electrodes, which should provide 100 dots of light. Their next model will have 625 electrodes. But the human eye is wired to analyze over 1 million points of light, so there is still a long way to go. Boston, ophthalmologist Joe Rizzo and engineer John Wyatt are trying a different approach. This time, the TV signal will not go directly to the brain, but will be sent by a laser into the eye.
Okay.
Once inside the eye, the laser beam will be turned into electrical signals by a solar panel on the back of the lens. The signals are then sent to a microchip on the retina, which stimulates the nerve cells that lead to the brain. The microchip that sits on the retina has 10,000 transistors on it. It's nearly as complicated as a color TV, but smaller than the pupil of the eye. The key to building such sophisticated chips is a technique called microfabrication. The lasers are so precise, they can print the entire Encyclopedia Britannica on a pinhead. Electronics will be small enough to fit the camera inside a false eye, so the brain will be able to control eye movement. In the future, the bionic eye could be fitted with a zoom lens and action replay.
Tissue engineering, talking about growing body parts, human body parts. Here we see a mouse in the laboratory that has grown an ear under his skin in the exact shape and form of a human ear under his skin. Now this is fantastic for body parts replacements. The story was kind of interesting. It struck me where he says, excuse me, having grown this human ear under his skin, the mouse is doing fine. Now I don't know if they asked the mouse or not, but here's a chance where you might be able to pick up a few bucks. I'm not sure, but there's little factories, of course, that'll be producing these, and possibly the very next time that you have a mouse problem at the house or out at the ranch, and you have a couple extra mice that you discover, you might want to go out in the back where you've located your little mice problem, and think of how much you could make if you could sell these little mice off to the local laboratory that's doing the tissue engineering. Let's see, and there's a lot of ears running around there. Now this lady's going to go on into her little mouse problem, and what you have to do is be careful and select one like she has, and don't be distracted by any of the other ones in the living room, and ship it off, and maybe they would pay you to grow an ear underneath your favorite mouse. I can't think of anything much more disgusting than that. But watch this tissue engineering.
The new technology is called tissue engineering, and it exploits the human body's natural ability to regenerate itself. Advanced Tissue Sciences in California is the world's first skin factory. They use a readily available raw material, circumcised foreskins. The company has attracted so much investment that the president, Gail Naughton, has become the $24 million woman.
The expansion potential of the cells is really quite amazing. You're dealing with young, healthy tissue. So from one small sample, one foreskin sample, you can get enough cells to make 250,000 square feet of final product, which is about 6 football fields worth of product.
The first stage is to expand the population of foreskin cells from 1 million to several hundred million by growing them in cultures. Then the cells are inserted into a system of cartridges known as a bioreactor. Inside each cartridge, the cells become attached to a mesh-like scaffold where they begin to divide and grow. The cells feel so at home, they form perfect human skin.
So by tricking them to thinking that they're in the body, they recreate a normal tissue within this bioreactor or tissue factory. We can then freeze this tissue and ship it off to the burn center or the wound care center where it's used for transplantation.
Building on the success of the skin factories, the tissue engineers are now starting to grow other tissue. This is human cartilage. This is a tissue-engineered heart valve, living and working in a bioreactor. The next step is to grow whole organs in the lab. And this will involve growing several different types of tissue simultaneously. Each organ will need a vascular system to deliver food and oxygen to keep it working. It will also need the pipework to get rid of its waste.
Are a little bit far off, but if you go and you look at how in fact we've been able to learn how to grow skin, muscles, ligament, tendon, cartilage, and bone, all separately, we believe that someday we will in fact be able to go and grow an entire human limb.
The tissue engineers have calculated it would take 8 weeks to grow a human limb. It could then be surgically attached to the rest of the body.
Certainly, if you look at all the advancements being made by genetic engineering and tissue engineering, it seems very possible that we can make a tissue that has super properties.
Selecting and manipulating genes could be the way to build a superhuman.
We can look at a scenario where a robot loses part of its body, but can simply clip another part of its body in. If they have a problem that can be corrected, they're almost immortal.
We'll be able to build robots that are as intelligent as humans and interact with us as humans do, and will become indistinguishable from humans. And I don't think this is going to happen in the very short term, but eventually down the line, I believe that that's what's going to happen.
So this brings us back to the cyborg concept, the idea of half human, half mechanical, half electronic, or an electronic brain, or the humanoid type that's brain has been taken over totally by some type of an insert or an implant or electronically controlled. If you'll remember earlier, we had the scientists that said that NATO had wanted and had requested from him a report on the creation of cyborgs. Now, this scientist was never told why they wanted that report, but nonetheless, the NATO, which is absolutely the enforcing arm, the military arm, if you will, the controlling, forcing arm of the New World Order. And they wanted to know all applications for possible cyborgs. Now, the question is, again, as we create the possibility of totally controlled humanoid types, who will be doing the controlling? Who will be doing the programming? And how much pre-programmed mind control or chip inserts or total mind inserts would there be in these humanoid type cyborgs? Well, let's get a look here. I want you to see the very beginning, the very first of the electronic controls by Dr. Delgado, who was early brought on several years ago by the government to do electronic manipulation of the brain from an external source. And I want to get into that, and then that proceeds to what we have presently functioning, which is an operation called Commando 1 that's taking place right now, has worked for a few years, and this is complete control of the mind of an entire city, state, or county area. This is really something. But first, let's go to Dr. Delgado. Here is the footage, a couple of stills of Dr. Delgado. Delgado, in his left hand, over here, as you can see it, has a small electronic mechanism. And right there you can see this little tiny gizmo like a transistor radio. This is several years ago under the Operation Mind Controls that Delgado was working on electronic equipment that could be utilized to control armies and everyone, so to speak. He actually made this statement before the U.S. Congress. And here's a bull that's about to charge him. He's irritated the bull with waving that cape in front of him. Now, if you'll notice here in this shot, Delgado has switched on the electronic signal from that little piece of equipment in his hand. He's dropped the cape, and the bull, being confronted with this signal, slams his brakes on. This bull is completely controlled and stopped dead by Dr. Jose Delgado. The bull actually reversed direction with this piece of equipment. He simply pressed the button, and the bull was stopped dead in his path. A total mind control. Delgado, speaking to the Senate and the Congress several years ago, said that we can control all the armies and the working class with electronic control mechanisms. Commando Solo. This is the aircraft, the C-130s, that are loaded up with mind control equipment. What do we mean by that? Well, for one thing, it overrides all television and radio in terms of transmission. By flying over a given country, a city, state, or whatever, you can send as many as you would want to cover as much territory as necessary at any point in time. Most recently, Commando Solo was used in the Bosnia elections. They were worried that they weren't going to come out the manner that they wanted to because there was information getting out from a contrary source. So they sent in 3 of the Commando Solo C-130 aircraft to fly over Bosnia the week prior to the elections and did their job so that the elections would come out the manner that they wanted them to. Watch this as a scientist talking about some of the same equipment and what he could do, or we could do, or can be done to change or alter the mindset of an entire nation.
War would be so secret, so invisible, so undetectable, you'd never know your mind was under attack. At Laurentian University in Ontario, Canada, a young student is about to undergo one of the strangest experiences of her life. They're hooking Denise's brain up to an electroencephalograph, or EEG machine. For 30 to 40 minutes, this will monitor her brain waves, while these electric coils attached on either side of her head will immerse her brain in an electromagnetic field. Her brain actually completes the circuit between the 2 coils. The field pulsing through her brain is less powerful than one given off by a digital clock radio, but acutely controlled and focused at specific parts of the brain. It will open Denise's mind to outside suggestion by this man.
What I do is switch to see its right or left hemisphere. Use your pedal touch.
Dr. Michael Persinger is a professor of psychology and neuroscience. He's designing ways to put the power of mind control to good use. Dr. Persinger's research focuses on brain trauma, and he uses carefully controlled doses of electromagnetic radiation to induce relaxation and alleviate pain.
So what Sandra did was to initiate a opiate releasing pattern. That's a burst firing field that is stimulated once every 4 seconds. And that produces relaxation and a very pleasant sensation. Similarly, using the appropriate fields, we can induce fear and apprehension, but clearly that would be unethical in that setting.
Dr. Persinger's tests suggest that carefully programmed electromagnetic frequencies can tap into individual brains and influence people's emotions.
The cognitive processes of the human brain are really quite simple. And if you understand how they work, you can make entire populations think and decide the manner in which you wish.
Many experts are skeptical of such an Orwellian scenario, but Persinger thinks the implications are chillingly real.
Suppose you generate a field that produces fear, fundamental fear, in large numbers of people. And then, over the television, more traditional ways, you say, the reason we're having this fear is because of this particular group. And now you start to move the population believing in a direction that you wish.
To influence 250 million people, the equivalent of the entire population of the United States, may not be that difficult. According to Dr. Persinger, we already have the technology, satellites on TV and radio transmitters. Mind control may already be happening. We know the mysterious PSYOPs plane can beam persuasive sounds and pictures into people's television sets. Will it someday beam disturbing frequencies directly into the mind? Mind control would be the ultimate non-lethal weapon.
Here is the head of Commando Solo taking us on board the craft and showing us the equipment, etc. But he's going to make a statement basically telling you where they have already used this. They've already used this equipment in several places. Do you ever wonder why, when the Pope went back and visited in 1997, here just a few months back, and went to visited Iran and Iraq, where basically the Muslims, I would say the Pope would be bottom man on their popularity list. But when he went back, they threw flowers at his feet, and 500,000 people greeted him cheering. And the interview with an Iraqi live at the scene, the Iraqi said, "He has come for peace for all of us." These are Muslims that a year or two back would have planned the demise of the Pope as part of a religion that they certainly were against. By using the C-130 mind-altering aircraft, they have changed the attitudes and the minds of thousands and thousands of people. Watch this. This is the commander himself of the operation.
Recently, this operation was totally classified, what the military calls black. This is the first time they've allowed a camera crew to record their highly sensitive capabilities. They are pirates of the airwaves, able to infiltrate media channels around the world. They can broadcast on AM, FM, military radio frequencies, and most television systems. A trailing wire 600 feet long broadcasts FM signals, while another drops 600 feet from the belly of the aircraft and transmits AM frequencies. Several planes make up the PSYOPs unit called Commando Solo. They can be refueled in the air, giving them virtually unlimited range. As part of Operation Desert Storm, PSYOPs broadcasts helped persuade Iraqi troops to surrender. But Operation Uphold Democracy in Haiti in October 1994 is its biggest success so far. The U.S. military's mission was to back ousted President Jean-Bertrand Aristide in overthrowing the de facto military regime. Commando Solo broadcast messages in Creole. Appeals for calm were interspersed with news panel discussions and local music. Other broadcasts were aimed at stemming refugee flotillas. Messages informed them they would not be allowed to enter the United States.
We were able to turn off the refugees, prepare the country, and to provide an alternative to invasion so that when Aristide did return, it was a peaceful return of a legitimate power. And that is the ultimate goal of psychological operations. We were able to basically win a contingency, I wouldn't call it a war, without firing a shot.
Paradoxically, the promise of truly bloodless war may come only with the most devastating weapon of all. If the human mind and will become the battleground of the future, War 2020 may be won without so much as a whimper, let alone a bang.
Dr. Persinger made reference to the ability to frighten 260 million people being afraid of a specific group. What group was he referring to? The militia or the patriot groups? Let's listen to him one more time and see what he's talking about.
We generate a field that produces fear, fundamental fear, in large numbers of people. And then over the television, more traditional ways, you say, the reason we're having this fear is because of this particular group. And now you start to move the population believing in a direction that you wish.
So where has this extreme technology come from? Starting from lighting matches and shooting little rockets into the air, to having the ability to launch spaceships into outer space, put satellites up around the entire Earth to surround us with high technology. to do regular launches on a regular basis and create actual space laboratories floating around the Earth and go to the moon. Where did this technology come from? Was it a normal progression? Was it a normal progression through scientific discoveries in the last 50 years? Or did the world get some kind of a jump start on micro-technology back some point in time around in the 40s? And of course you have all of those people that would say that that jump start came from alien technology. And you can't, because of the information that's been available, we can't throw cold water on that possible concept. The idea that behind Area 51, this technology has been back engineered from someplace else. There always is that possibility. Now we're going to cover that extensively in the brand new videotape that's titled The President's Papers on UFOs. And this is a brand new videotape, be available in November. But for example, this Russian craft that has been designed and will be finished here in about 1998, 7 months, 8 months from now. This huge kind of a flying saucer, which both the United States and Russia have been dabbling in. This was the original rough footage of one of their first flights with it. This craft will carry 2,500 people. Where did the technology come from? Again, you constantly have to just look back. In the early 50s, this is a floating platform experimentation of charged atmosphere, actually utilizing charging ions in the atmosphere to float this frame. Well, that looks pretty simple in terms of size and weight, but the very concept has been carried on to the drawing board, to the ion-charged vehicle, similar to what you're looking at here in a artist's conception. However, these are being worked on. But how far back was ion charging and that type of project? And when did it start? And where did we get the starting blocks for this? This is an actual book written by the United States. This is done by the Atomic Energy Commission. This was done in the 50s. It covers a period of time of 1950 up through 1958. Now, the Atomic Energy Commission at that time, which presently would be NASA, put this book together, and was interesting because it was a very public book. It was public distribution. And in the book, they show what laboratories they were working on with plasma charging, ion charging, and these high exotic atomic derived energies that they were testing at that time. Of course, the old Oak Ridge laboratories, where they've created so many of the microwave and laser weapons, Los Alamos and Livermore laboratories, where they've done the weather control productions of secret products out of there for weather control. And here shows you the Oak Ridge laboratories that were back in the 50s, now early 50s, working on ion source technology and the charging of ions and plasma ions. This is all the technology related to magnetic fields, etc., that they are using at the HAARP installations in 3 different locations around the world relative to weather control, the electronic charging. And if you'll notice, much of the work here, they say, was carried out prior to 1954. So someplace between 1947, when the Roswell crash theoretically took place, and we theoretically captured a flying saucer or two from someplace else, from that point forward, we started working on molecular ion ignition systems. We started working on the weapon concept of shockwave experimentations, which are all the experiments and the products that you've seen here on this video, just now in its final completed stage. The idea of magnetic mirrors and the illumination and use of plasma charges and magnetics to alter plasma charges and bring them down to a concentrated laser. This is one of the drawings out of the book, a diagram that was done in the 50s now. You have to remember now, the first television was not presented to the United States until 1949. That was when we first had TV. And those were old vacuum tube concepts. And at the same time, within a couple of years, we're talking about charged plasma sources, particle ray guns, magnetics, and included kinetic energy as heat. And these, again, are the kinetic weapons that we're now having put before us all around the world by the secret government. Where has this technology come from? Will the one world government succeed? Will Big Brother have the opportunity to keep an eye on all of us every day, every minute of the day, never missing a single activity of our lives? Will they control every bit of our lives? I don't know. My concern is that they will complete one world government and that they will have an unelected officials, a parliamentary, non-representative government controlling the world. Well, people ask me, they say, Bob, why do you continue doing what you're doing? Why do you keep going on with this? Well, hopefully you've gotten some information this evening that'll be helpful, maybe frightening, but maybe helpful to you so you'll know what's going on. I figure if I yell long enough and I yell loud enough, maybe it'll make a difference. Maybe enough people will hear. It's very important that we all remember one point, and that is that the government is not the enemy. They are not the bad guys. We don't have to fear our government. We have to fear those specific people in government that are corrupted. Those are the ones we are concerned with. Remember, in the United States, we are the government until we let it totally fall apart in front of our eyes. Your job is to spread the word the best you can every single day and to prepare your friends, family, and neighbors for the future. You, as a patriot, you are the heroes. All the military men that have laid their lives down for freedom and for the American people in the past, they are the heroes. Remember,